What up, guys? So today on the podcast, you're gonna get to meet one of my students. We've had him on the podcast before. I think he was like number 80 or something.
Yeah, episode 8.
But he was recently on a show, and when you listen to the podcast, we're gonna make a lot of references to the show because I'm kind of asking him questions as I'm going through it because I kind of get to catch up with him about it. But if you haven't seen the show, it's on Netflix. It's called Outlast, and it's a survival show. He'll talk more about it in a bit. It's a fun show. I got really entertained by it. Maybe it was because he's one of my black belts, but I like to think that in my eyes he kind of made the show. To me, it made it the most entertaining, and I've got a few messages from you guys like asking me about it. He was like, "Oh, did you see this guy who was a black belt on this show or whatever?" Like, that's my black belt. That's one of my guys. He's right out there doing it. But again, hopefully you guys enjoy the podcast. And besides the show, there's kind of an underlying theme I think about it, which is developing skills. And it's something that I think when you hear my buddy Justin talk about this, there's this pursuit of acquiring skills and then putting them to the test. And it's something he's done with everything from like snowboarding, jiu-jitsu, and getting in obviously to the survival stuff. So hopefully you guys enjoy the podcast and have a good time being entertained by it. It's one of our longer podcasts because we're here in person. And we were drinking a little bit of bourbon. So it was good bourbon too. It was good bourbon, and had some of this beef jerky after we got hungry. So hopefully you guys enjoy the podcast. Again, big thanks to our sponsor, Charlotte's Web, for helping make the podcast happen. Again, I always encourage people, if you've never tried Charlotte's Web, it's a really useful tool, in my opinion, my bearded opinion, for recovery. It's something that I like taking at nighttime to help me support healthier sleep cycles. And I find value in it. And again, I started using CBD originally back in, I think, 2018 when we were down in one of these Costa Rica trips that Justin will mention on the podcast. One of the guys gave me a little CBD, a balm. I used it and I felt some benefits. So I was like, okay, let me try some of the CBD stuff out. I started using the tinctures and the gummies. I really like the products. And Charlotte's Web is a company that makes a premier product. So, again, the stuff is unregulated, but they go through the extra steps that they don't have to make sure that they put together a very pure product that when you get it, you know what's in that bottle, you know what's in that tub of gummies, whatever it is that you get, and you can count on that. And so, again, if you guys have never tried it before, I encourage you to go to their website at charlottesweb.com and, get whatever you want to get, whether you get the THC. It's technically not free, but it is I guess it's low enough of a threshold that if you get tested for things like USADA testing, you'll test. Actually, someone just got tested for cannabis just recently. It was like some athlete, she got popped for it. But anyway, if you get tested by things like with the USADA stringent sort of standards, you would be safe in there. But again, they have other different products there. But whatever you try, use the promo code Jiu-Jitsu20, and you'll get 20% off your order. Also, thanks to our buddy Matt at Epic Roll. He's been a longtime supporter of the podcast. Again, I really like his stuff. Cool t-shirts, gis, rash guards, shorts, basically anything you need for jiu-jitsu gear or apparel. Cool designs, high quality stuff. And again, he always, I don't know if he still does this, but he always has little extra touches in the packages when you get them. You might find an extra patch, or you might find a little note to you. A lot of people who have ordered that stuff. A lot of you guys that listen to the podcast have ordered stuff from him. And a lot of times I'll get like a picture of like a little note or whatever that he sent in the podcast. So I think it's cool. But again, if you've never been on his website, go to epicrollbjj.com. Look through the website, see if there's anything that catches your eye. And if you end up ordering something, use the promo code Chewjitsu, CHEWJITSU, for 15% off. And it supports the podcast, and you get a discount on the gear. And guys, if you've never been to the website Manscaped, I encourage you to do so. Manscaped is a premier men's grooming company. Originally, they started off as like they went like whole hog into like your balls, ball trimming, everything else, right? That was originally a bit of a reservation for me to talk about, but I actually use a trimmer. It's a good trimmer. But they have everything now. I mean, so at the house, I've used all their products. They've got a nose trimmer, ball trimmer, which you can use that trimmer for whatever you want to. They've got a beard trimmer, which I need to use. Justin's laughing; he can't help himself.
I love it.
just some grown men talking about trimming their balls.
Whole hog.
Yeah, I need to use a whole hog. I need to use a trimmer.
Look at that. Let's see.
Look how hairy I am.
Oh, look at you go.
My wife, she likes to use a trimmer, and she I don't know if
you're like a sheep.
I don't know if it's everyone's wife. But but like everyone's girlfriend or wife, whatever. But there's almost like this like chimp thing where like, you know, it's like she loves like if I've got like a pimple or something, she's got like the little like pimple popping kit. You know, she watches those Dr. Pimple Popper videos. She comes out and wants to pop it, you know. And then she loves trimming me, right? And she's got those she's got like we use the Manscaped trimmers to like trim my chest hair, my shoulder hair and stuff. And I remember the old trimmer, she actually cut me one time with them, with a big one. I had a big one, you know,
you deserve it.
But that said, the Manscaped trimmers, they have the like little like safeguard technology. Skin safe technology. I've never been cut by them at all. It's not even close. But again, really good products, good quality products, premier products. And then all their lotions, balms, and soaps and everything else smell amazing too. So if you are a man or if you know a man in your life that would like to step up their grooming game, go to their website, manscaped.com. The promo code is Jiu-Jitsu 20 for 20% off the order, and you get free shipping. It's a good deal. And guys, if you want to support the podcast directly, you can do so by going to our Patreon at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. Upon joining, you'll get access to a library of exclusive content we've been building for a number of years since the podcast has been going. And on top of that, you'll get access. Again, I've talked about this numerous times, but I think it's useful. You'll get access to a seminar that I did some years ago showing some gi and no-gi techniques, some of my best stuff. And then also you'll get access to a sort of warm-up / muscle activation routine that Eugene made several years ago for some jiu-jitsu practitioners that were coming to our gym for a camp. And again, it's 20 minutes long and it's really useful. I've been actually doing a lot more stretching recently and a lot more muscle activation, that kind of stuff. And my body feels a lot better for it. I'll show you guys more details on YouTube at some point. But if you're one of those people where, you know, maybe your muscles are your body's a little tight and, you know, you don't do anything after training. So you go through this hard training, you do all this stuff and you just go home and sit. It would be a really good idea to spend some time either after a shower or right after done training, or maybe even before training, loosening things up. You might find that your jiu-jitsu performance improves from it. I know that my like being able to retain guard after improving my hip mobility got better. And you might notice that you just feel better after training. You're not getting injured as much. Those are good things. Again, it takes a little bit of work because you got to do something that most of us don't find that enjoyable, like stretching and just holding a stretch or doing these movements that can be somewhat uncomfortable, but can be super useful. And again, you get access to it by joining the Patreon at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And guys, if you have not done so before and you would like to get my daily email that I send out, which I go off in the weeds about all kinds of stuff, everything from philosophy and books I'm reading to jiu-jitsu tips and ideas to random things and random stories that I find are funny. But if you guys have never checked it out at jiu-jitsu.net, my website, CHEWJITSU.net/join, JOIN. Upon joining, you'll get access to my daily email. And I also send exclusive offers to my email list that no one else gets. And so again, you can join that by going to my website at jiu-jitsu.net/join. So guys, with that said, let's jump into the podcast with Justin. It was right around halfway through the show. It was like all of a sudden Justin's, you know, in his makeshift ghillie suit over there in the bushes, taking their stuff. And then that's when the show got really interesting, because at first you're watching it and, you know, it's just a bunch of people trying not to die from starvation and thirst. And then Justin goes over, all right, let's speed this process up. And then you're going over there and getting rid of the thing. And you're like, oh my gosh, what? Then it got really interesting because you're thinking like, what are they going to do? You know, what's everybody going to do? And then, you know, it was interesting to watch some of the dynamics. You know, there was the one group I just kind of laughed. Was it the guy, Paul? Paul left the group.
Yeah.
And then they like walked over there like, we're really disappointed in you. I was like, come on, man. You know, this is a show. But, you know, the thing that I found funny is like, I don't know if it was done, you know, intentionally for the show or if this is how they felt, but some of the people talked about it as if you were hurting someone. And, you know, my thought process was, this is a show. It's a competition. You're not actually injuring anyone. So it's not a big deal. This isn't on purpose. This isn't even against the rules. Right. They know this stuff's going to happen, but some of the people on the show made a big fuss about, like, when you're watching the Netflix show, you're watching it and they're, I can't believe they would do that to someone. And then you look at some of the comments and I'm like, he didn't go and kill them in their sleep. Right. He took their sleeping bags and all they have to do is say, I'm done, and it's over. You go home.
Right. No, exactly. And in the survival situation, it's a battle of resources. So if the shit hit the fan in the world today, 3 days, 1 week tops, it's going to fall apart. Right.
Bro.
People are going to be killing each other in the streets. I mean, look at the COVID nonsense, right? People are arguing, fighting over toilet paper, right? Something that is not really essential to life. You can get through life without toilet paper.
Toilet paper didn't exist for a long time.
So yeah, rolled crap and paper. So the interesting point is there's a lot of people out there waving that false banner of moral virtue, that flag, and it's just to make themselves feel better because they're judging from a place of comfort. They don't have the balls to do anything that myself or anyone else on that show did. And whether you like it or not, right? I mean, at the end of the day, when you're in that situation and you're playing a game, and it's no different than jiu-jitsu, right? If we're rolling and you get me in an armbar, we'll have the choice to either tap or, and not that you'll do it intentionally, but the risk that we both agree upon when we slap hands and fist bump is if I don't tap, my arm will break. And that's no fault of yours. That's mine. So a lot of people that don't train, that don't understand that dynamic in a environment of competitiveness, there's always that risk. And one thing that I don't like that was said on the show, and if you watch the show, you'll see it. I don't like competition. It always brings out the worst in people.
Who said?
Well,
one of the guys.
Well, guess what, motherfucker? You're on a show that is a competition
to win money,
and you're in the wrong place. So what are you doing here? You don't like competitive. Well, okay, you don't like a certain level of competition. Now, if you're winning, you'll like it, right. If you're losing, no. Or if things are threatened, right? Nobody likes losing in competition. No one likes getting disqualified, right? And I feel like I have a perpetual behavior pattern that allows me
Justin
to be put in this situation.
Habitual line stepper.
Well, I mean, I'm kind of. I'll admit. I mean, there's times that I feel like I can be very agreeable, and then there's times that I can be a downright shithead, and I think that's in all of us, right? But at the same time, I'll own it, and I'm not afraid to admit it. And I don't try to be that way. And for clarification, I think for those that have seen the show, for those that maybe haven't, there's things that happen, and people want to accuse me of like not having moral integrity or that I'm less of a person.
Sure.
So, and that's fine. And they can judge me for that. But at the same time, if I had to do it all over again, I would do it because if we're on a team,
people like what the show, just to like, so you were on a show on Netflix, and what was it called?
A show, it's called Outlast.
Okay.
And it's a Netflix show that the concept is so if you've seen Alone, and Alone is on, or was on the History Channel, I believe it's on Netflix as well. But that concept of that show is you take 10 people, survivalists, people that are in that world, in that realm of take homesteaders, people that live off grid, or just someone who's an avid camper that likes to do survival type things. You put them out in the wilderness. They're allowed 10 items of their choice that they get to take with them. Alone is based on surviving in the wilderness. You have nothing but the items that you bring with you, and it's the last man or woman standing. Very cool concept, very cool show. It's in its 10th season. The same producers of that show from season 1 and season 2, and then it changed, took a different ownership, wanted the same concept, but with teams, as opposed to just one person, one individual. And keep in mind, on Alone, your responsibility is filming yourself with GoPros, having cameras set up, and they teach you all that. They have like an introductory class for like a week. With us, there was nothing that we filmed ourselves. The concept of a team of 4, you don't have resources. You are dropped into the Alaskan Tongass National Rainforest, which is constantly raining. It makes up 13% of I believe the world's rainforest. So it's just a cold, wet, nasty environment, and you have to survive. And production, the show will provide you with certain resources. So for instance, like on the first day, and I don't want to get too far ahead, but like it's essential to have certain things that you can, like a tool that you can cut things to make firewood, to create a shelter, something to make fire with. So we got one knife, one hatchet, one fire starting device, a tarp, some rope, and like 2 cups. And keep in mind, each team got the same thing, but there's 4 of us to share these items. And so what that does is it allows you to figure out amongst your team, like, okay, well, what do you all bring to the table? Who's going to be responsible for what? Obviously, we all equally share it, but it would be more or less like if we were training, we have one gi, it's universal, and it's like an A2, which probably fits you guys, but that doesn't fit me. Right. So it's like, okay, now what do we do with this? How do we utilize it to the betterment of our team? So, and then it's the last team standing. You have to finish with a team. You can't finish by yourself. And you don't have to finish with the team that you originally start with. So it's it's a recipe for disaster.
Well, it was set up in a way. I mean, and again, they're making a show, so they want it to be entertaining, but you're setting up a situation where you're going to put people under crazy amounts of stress, and you're making them have to cooperate with people, which again, cooperate with complete strangers, which is a problem anyway, then under high levels of stress. And you can bounce around in teams, which means that you're going to end up playing like this diplomatic thing where you're going to be having alliances and switching and swapping teams. People are going to get upset about it. I mean, that's going to happen. You just know it's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know? I mean, it was done intentionally, which is good because it's a television. It's for entertainment.
Yeah, it's reality TV. And, you know, I'm not really a big reality TV guy. I don't really watch too many reality TV shows unless it sparks some type of interest of, you know, surviving or, like, for instance, like Ultimate Fighter, right? That I had interest in that for a little while.
Sure.
But I honestly couldn't tell you who was on it other than I know Uriah Faber. I know some of the guys that I like that I watched. I know Josh Ferguson, local Kentucky guy here. He was on it. Kenny Degenhart. He was like one of the coaches, one of our guys.
Oh, nice.
But other than that, you know, because it is like, I've heard you talk about this or even respond to someone online about, you know, Ultimate Fighter, right? A bunch of dudes that are fighters, throw them into a room and then you provide them with alcohol. Sure. There's going to be some shit going down.
And they can't read. They can't read books. They have no contact with the outside world.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
They can't have any entertainment.
The only thing that they do is train, sit around in their own thoughts, and then they have a full liquor cabinet.
Oh, God.
I'm like, and they're all a bunch of dudes, and they're like, and they're between like in their like 20s and early 30s.
Yeah.
What do you think's going to happen?
Yeah, sure.
You already know it's going to be crazy. That's why there was the one episode way back when, you know, Dana White comes and he's got to do it, right? Guys, you know, he's basically just talking to him. What are you guys doing? Whatever. I'm like, why'd you give him a full liquor cabinet, you asshole?
Because,
you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know what you're doing.
Another recipe for disaster.
That's right.
So what was the pull like initially? Like, I mean, you've done jiu-jitsu for your black belt. You've won some big competitions. You've done a lot of difficult things. What was like this whole process of like a desire to do this survival show initially? I mean, is it like to test yourself? Is it just,
I think it's interesting to kind of go back a little bit more because the show came about because you've been on this little journey these last several years where you got into doing this survival stuff. I can't remember when it was, and you can talk about that, but you got started on this, like, outdoorsman, survivalist sort of journey. And then it just so happened that you'd been going to all these courses, doing all these trips and everything else to be good at this skill. And then all of a sudden the show pops up and it's like, oh, let's do something with it, you know?
Yeah.
So how did you get started with all that?
So it dates back to when I was a kid. I always have been an outdoorsman, a woodsman, and I have to thank my dad for bringing me with him hunting. And we made a ton of mistakes.
Your dad's pretty badass dude too. He does.
Well, thank you.
He does some cool shit.
Yeah, he's an avid bow hunter. When he's not racing, riding horses, he's a jockey. He lives outdoors. He loves being outside. He loves to hike. It's his. It's kind of his getaway time. And so, growing up in that environment, I grew up in Louisiana. So Louisiana, I think the state slogan is sportsman's paradise. And there's a lot that Louisiana offers. I still think to this day, it's kind of the armpit of America, but the dirty South. But aside from that, so that's where it started for me. And I've been fortunate enough to bounce around the country and to live in a lot of different places from coast to coast and everywhere in between. So part of doing that, I've been able to bow hunt and hunt in different regions across the country that I've seen a lot. So I've always had that interest of just being outdoors and and intrigued by what it takes to actually survive. If in that situation you had to depend on resources and you had limited resources. So that was always something like if we're out in the woods, because when I was 14, my father and I, we were hunting in California. We were wild pig hunting and we got stranded in the mountains. And that's a whole nother story. But long and short of it, we were able to hike out, and we were in a part of California where at that time, obviously weed was illegal and there was a lot of pot farms out there. And if you go tromping around in certain places that you don't belong, you could be shot on sight. And there's actually, there is a documentary about that. I think it's called, Joe Rogan had the guy, I can't remember his name, but it's what's the guy that the big, the conspiracy, the guy that lives out in the woods. That's the big, Sasquatch. Yeah. I think it's called Sasquatch. Okay. So anyway,
Finding Sasquatch.
Something like that. But it's about that. It's not necessarily about Sasquatch, but it's a cover up some murder. And anyway, long story short, that it was. So in California, we had that to worry about. So that always resonated with me. It's like, what if we actually had to live out here? And I kind of romanticized that whole idea. So as I got older and into my 20s, I kind of gravitated away from it. I still would hunt and I would still go out and bow hunt and fish and do a lot of outdoor stuff, but I kind of got away from the whole camping aspect and was able to stay in the woods enough to at least hunt. But later in life, I found it again and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to take a deep dive in this because this is something that I really like to do. And it was more or less a refresher for me taking some of these classes and being in this state. There's two survival schools that offer a lot of classes. And so I felt like, man, this is great because I bounce back and forth between both of them. And one of your black belts, Tony Spencer, he's pretty much like in that space. And I looked to him and started taking classes with him. And, yeah, it was just something that I felt like I wanted to get back involved in and do as a hobby. I don't want to make a living in the survival world, but at the same time, I wanted to test myself and get into that world of survival and just bring my skill set up to ultimately like a black belt level in that world. I'm far from that, but at the same time, I know enough to where if you threw me out in the wilderness and I had limited resources, I could survive. And I also feel like I could help people too. But it's bigger than that too. Like a lot of search and rescue people use these types of things for rescuing people that get lost hikers, people that just get hurt out there. And so that's kind of where it stems from, is from a early childhood, being a hunter, an avid fisherman. And now as an adult, I really enjoy it. It's something that, I'll continue to work on that skill too until I feel like I'm at the black belt level in survival.
It's interesting. It's something I've noticed a lot with people is they'll have some interest when they're young, childhood, teenager years, early 20s, whatever. And then they like drop it off. And somewhere around the road, 30s, 40s, most of the time when you start to sort of get settled a little bit, you get to know yourself a little bit more, or maybe you have a little bit of money to spend on things. And then all of a sudden, hey, I always wanted to do this, or I used to really love doing this thing. I'm going to go do this thing again. I was reading, I think it was a book from Carl Jung, and he was talking about that. When he got to a certain point in his years, he started going back and doing all these things that he used to do as a kid, as an adult. And like I said, like going back and diving into this hunting, camping, and survivalist stuff. That's kind of interesting that it was like originally it was something you wanted to do a long time ago. It sort of laid dormant. And then for some reason, something sparked it.
Yeah. And on that note, it's exactly my journey with Jiu-Jitsu. So my first Jiu-Jitsu class was in 2005 with a good friend of mine that I wrestled with. And at the time, I was living in the mountains in Colorado in Breckenridge, and I was just living a different lifestyle, snowboarding and living that snowboard bum skier lifestyle. My friend Sean, who was a badass wrestler from Oklahoma, because I graduated in the late 90s. And so 10 years later, he's practicing, doing jiu-jitsu, still wrestling and doing MMA, which is kind of crazy because I remember watching Cowboy Cerrone fight for the first time as an amateur.
Oh, wow.
Well, for me, it was the first time watching him.
Yeah,
And that's
in
where I saw
Colorado?
in Denver
Yeah.
in 2005, man.
It's crazy.
So anyway, I remember thinking at that time in my life, I think I might have been 25 or something, 24. I went to a class. I did a class and I was like, man, I love this. Because keep in mind, I grew up watching the first, I think, we're all enough to watch the
UFCs and
first
stuff,
UFC.
Absolutely.
I was in high school and I think the first UFC or maybe the second one was in Denver. I didn't go there,
The
but
first
I watched
one was in
The first one.
Arena.
McNichols
Do you remember what was his face? Bill Wallace burped. Like there's a funny bit if you get on YouTube and watch. It's a video of Bill Wallace, who is a legend in kickboxing. But when he was announcing, there were so many screw ups.
Oh my god!
It started off with him going, "Welcome to Arena," right? Burps,
and he called it something else. He called it
the
like
ultimate
fighting
challenge.
Yeah, when it was Ultimate Fighting Championship.
It was Ultimate Fighting Championship. Yeah, he's like, "Welcome to the Ultimate Fighting Championship."
Clearly says it on the canvas. But
it was in Denver. So yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, I knew that. And so backing up to like when I was a young lad, when I was 12, 13 years old, I took karate. Right. And so that was the thing. I mean, we grew up on Bloodsport, Karate Kid.
Oh yeah. Bloodsport.
So for me, that was the traditional martial art that most kids in the 80s, 90s were familiar with.
Yeah, I did Taekwondo.
Yeah. Right.
You do some kicking, punching martial art.
Yeah. And I mean, wrestling was there, but I obviously, for me, growing up in Louisiana, wrestling wasn't a thing.
Well, and we never thought of wrestling as a martial art or a fighting style.
No.
Not until
it was an extracurricular activity, sport at school.
Right. And then I didn't really think of, wrestling being a fighting style until I went and watched the UFC teams. And you saw guys like Mark Coleman and Mark Kerr go in there and just take guys down and pound the crap out of them. You're like, oh, wrestling's a fighting style. So we didn't think of it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So, with that background and then moving up back to like my initial class in 05, I remember going in that class and I loved it so much. I fell in love with it. I went to my mom's house. I was trying to tell my brother about it. Like, dude, you got to come do this. You got to come check this out. Because I just got murdered, right? And I loved it. I knew that I needed to be there. So I went to another class. My friend Sean was very accommodating because he knew it had been years since we wrestled, but he was preparing for an MMA fight while I'm the snowboard bum living up in the mountains, right? Two different lives. But I remember thinking at the time, man, I can't commit to this because I'm a broke snowboarder guy in my 20s. So at some point in time, when I have the time and I have the means and the funds to afford it, I'm going to get back to this. So it's kind of the same thing with the survival thing. However, with jiu-jitsu, it was only 5-6 years later that when I had my career established and I started, moving towards like making better money and kind of getting out of my 20s, I'm like, I want to get into jiu-jitsu because I knew how valuable it was. And probably if I would have trained even in my 20s, I wouldn't have taken it. I wouldn't appreciate it as much as I did when I got a little older. So that was kind of the same thing to your point. You find things a little bit later and whatever that spark is maybe in your youth and you kind of fall back to it. So that was it for me for jiu-jitsu as well.
Yeah. What parallels have you drawn, between jiu-jitsu and like survival type training? Like what are some things maybe like jiu-jitsu has complemented, that type of training and vice versa? What have been some things there?
I would say your mindset and how you approach things, and for survival, it's always going to be about resources and what you can take and use to better your situation. So in jiu-jitsu, it's the same thing, right? If you're on bottom and you're in a bad position, you can't freak out. You can't let your emotions get to you. You have to be very strategic in what your next movement is if you're in a bad spot. And so a parallel there would be just mentally dealing with shit and pressure and that stress inoculation and how you handle that, how you process that. Because I think most men are pretty logical thinkers and we can process things that will eventually get us out of a bad situation and help us out. And so for me, going into these survival situations or doing these classes, and I've done a lot of different types of classes, survival 1, 2. I've done 2 SEER training classes, which is survive, evade, resist, and escape. I would say it's the civilian version. It's not military, but there is some stress inoculation. And I've seen people quit in those situations too. It's just too much. It's too overwhelming. But most jiu-jitsu people are like, piece of cake, man, bring it on, baby. So aside from that, I would say just when you do have good resources, you have good tools out there in the wild, you can use them well. If you got a good arm bar, you got a good sweep, man, if someone's even bringing like a solid A game against your A game in a sweep or in a, in a submission situation, like even if someone is aware of it, they got to respect it. So, and that's like when I go out there and I do these classes and my instructors are teaching something, I know what they're capable of, and they'll still push us. They'll still retort back to a stress inoculation. I'll give you an example. We'll be doing something, a task, right? All right, build a shelter, build a fire, have the fire burn a string at 2 feet high, but also at the same time find something that you can boil water in that same time period. Oh, and by the way, build a trap over here. All right, that's a bunch of things. With a team, you got to go do that. While we're doing that, setting up a ridge line, putting our tarp, building the shelter, which is pretty easy. One of the instructors, one of the cadre might come by, cut your string. How are you going to react to that? Right? So just when you think you're getting one up on a black belt, right? And all of a sudden, nope, it takes something away as a lower belt or even black belts, right? So just dealing with that, processing it, and as frustrating as it may be, it kind of shows what your mental fortitude is. So a lot of it is mental. And I would say, and that's in anything in life, that may sound pretty vague, but I always kept resorting back to that, like while I was on the show, and even when I do these other trainings, and when I'm preparing for a training, even a jiu-jitsu competition. So it's kind of relative in the same way.
What was the prep like for a show like like Outlast? What was so you probably found out a little bit beforehand that you're going to make it in, that you're going to be on the show. So like, kind of your thinking going in, like, what were you like, what do I need to prepare for? What was your training like? And what was just kind of the preparation for that type of environment?
2 things. One, I felt like I needed to get in really great shape. So I was training on the mat, jiu-jitsu, quite a bit, because my thought process was we were going to have all kinds of physical tasks to do. I thought it was going to be, the way it was explained to me with production, it was going to be like a little bit of the Amazing Race. You're going to have challenges. You're going to be in a survival situation. And anything past that, whatever they said, I blanked out, because I'm like, okay, I like that. I've challenged me, baby, out in the wilderness. No one's going to beat me if I can formulate a strong team. But leading into the train, or before the show, I was doing a lot of preparations with both schools here in Kentucky, and I'll just throw them out there. Nature Alliance, owned by Craig Cottle, Campcraft Outdoors by Jason Hunt, both great guys, both jiu-jitsu guys. One's a judo black belt. So they understand like where I was coming from. I worked on fire making skills, because in the rainforest, everything's wet. It's hard enough just to make a fire alone. If you're, just out there, like, okay, you got to have certain things together to make a spark and create fire, especially if you're limited. Do it when it's raining. That's a whole another set of problems. Trapping. I haven't done a lot of trapping growing up, but trapping, once you understand like the concept and what to look for, you just create funnels. It's almost like fishing. You're going to fish in areas where you feel like the fish are. So you set your traps in areas that are little funnels for the animals to come in or come out. Aside from that, believe it or not, I actually did a class 2 weeks before I went to Alaska, and it was called Scout Tracker 2. And that's basically just a big adult version of hide and go seek. So if you watch the show and you see episode 4 and you understand what goes on with the whole situation, there's a part that, for those that haven't seen this show, I don't want to, spoiler alert, but for those that have, you kind of understand that everything that I did in episode 4 was a reflection of the training that I did right before it. And it just happened to be that that was one of the classes that Craig offered that I went to, and I enjoy those types of trainings. It's fun. I mean, if you've ever played hide and go seek as an adult, it's just so much more fun when you're in camo and you get dirty and you just, you can, I mean, people show up with ghillie suits and it's like, all right, come find me. Yep. At the same token, trying to find someone, right? It's not like they're going 50 yards deep into the woods. I'm trying to be so well hidden and so stealth that I could reach out and grab you and you walk right by me and you don't see me. So that's the concept of that, which makes it much more challenging.
Well, and that was like one thing when I was watching that episode, there was that moment where, it was pretty suspenseful because you're like, what's going to happen? And you're there, parked under the bushes and then the camera's on you. And I'm thinking, is that cameraman sitting right in front of him? Because that's going to give it away.
Yeah. What was the setup of that? And also, how close were they to seeing you? I mean, how close were the people when they were searching for you?
Yeah, great question. So when I initially did what I did on episode 4, and as I was retreating back to my camp, the Delta team's camera crew was on me because I had a GoPro and there was the aerial shot drone. Yeah. There was 2 drones, but they lost me in the woods. It's the foliage so thick in Alaska. It's if you're not out in the open, you're not going to be seen. The camera crew person happened to be a woman that is small. She's maybe 110 pounds. So when I initially was in that camp and doing what I did, when I first saw her, I thought it was the opposing team. So I was a little spooked. But then I realized that the camera, I saw the fisheye lens or the wide angle lens. And I'm like, oh, okay, so she's going to trail me. She's going to shadow me back to where I'm going to go. My objective was to get back, stash what I had, and then lay low and then get back to my camp. So the camera person, I had a conversation as close as we are. I said, look, I know that I'm not going to be found, but don't blow my cover. You've got to stay stealth. And so she was like, okay. And I wasn't asking her. I was telling her. I said, otherwise, I'm going to get gone because I still have the GoPro. We'll get the footage. We'll get the shot. And that's very important on the production side of things, which there's some pushback there. And you kind of have to comply to what it is they're wanting. Because at the end of the day, it is a show. So I have to kind of abide by the rules. But she was great. And hats off to her. She was so stealth. And the way that the terrain was, and just from doing the trainings here in Kentucky, I knew that I could put myself up against the terrain, which it kind of sloped up. There was a tree and then there was a log going over me, which the shot that when you're watching the show, you can't really tell, but there was a log laying across my body, which is great. Cause when you're in that situation, if you're looking at an area where you're trying to find someone and all you see is a log, you're going to follow that log and it's going to redirect your sight away from where you are if you're hiding. So I knew that, and that was helpful. All the while where she was kind of down in this little slope in this little pocket. So she was actually in a better hiding position than I was. So she wasn't going to be seen. And she had no camo on. She was wearing like black and I think a blue jacket. But I'm like, I almost was going to try to convince her, like, let's trade places. But anyway, so she actually positioned herself better than I was. And I was just trying to do the best I could to cover up, still had the makeshift ghillie suit and was trying to make sure that I wasn't going to be found. And I knew it wasn't going to be found because you couldn't detect that there was a human body laying where I was. So anyway, when the other team, Delta, Joel and Dawn, those are the 2 characters, two people, when they were looking for me, I saw Dawn, I got eyes on her. And it was, to me, it was like a game. It was exciting. My chest was pounding because I'm like, I'm about to get busted, but maybe not, because I know I was pretty confident in my concealment, thankfully from my training. But she is also very good at what she does. Like, hats off to Dawn. She is a great tracker, and she has done that professionally in her home state. And so working with law enforcement and tracking is a whole nother level of like, it's very challenging to be a good tracker.
Okay.
And the problem is that she tracked not only me, but she tracked the camera person plus the safety. So there was 3 sets of prints leading to like my general location. So that kind of gave it away. But at the same time, she didn't find me, and she got close, 20, 25 yards.
Okay.
Now I couldn't reach out and touch her, but I had eyes on her and she never saw me. And in the event, if she did find me, because I was thinking about what's this conversation going to look like? I've got your resources. I have leverage. You're not going to find them because I didn't have them on me. I stashed them. Let's have that conversation. Let's see where the game unfolds now. Because keep in mind, at this point in time, during this show, we had already been out there for 2 weeks. The fat had been trimmed. The men and women that had left the show, they weren't going to outlast out there. The people that were there were meant to be there.
They were tough people.
Yeah. I mean, so, 2 weeks out in the wilderness, you're hungry, you're cold. I mean, the first 4 or 5 nights, we had nothing but the clothes on our back. It was miserable. The first night, I maybe got 1 hour of sleep, tossing, turning, had the worst headache the next day. The thought of quitting, it's always kind of like wanting to play mind tricks on you, right? Because it's just like, if you're in a bad position, it's like tapping to pressure, right? To side control pressure. You're like,
you can always tap and they'll be off of you.
But man, if I can just find a little more comfort, okay, all right. Oh God, this sucks. But at the same time, you always have that comfort, that inner bitch where you can be, all right, this is enough. But you fight through that, right? And on the other side of that, it's so rewarding. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's just, it like you saw people when I was watching the show, you see these people kind of start talking about it. It's kind of like you talk about them as being shooting stars, right? Like, oh, jiu-jitsu, I'm so into it. This is what I love. This is what I want to do. And they go and
it was surprising. Like, there was people that dropped out within a day or two.
Exactly.
I was thinking, what are you doing?
Well, what they said was, I was listening to them, and a couple of them were like, oh, it's my dream to like be in Alaska and do this thing. And then all of a sudden they're the ones that quit the next day.
I mean, because that one team, B team, like, their guys were gone in a couple of days. They all just said, I mean, we're leaving.
Yep.
I was like, what, you're leaving? You just started. In my thought process, into your credit, like the shooting star, sometimes people will romanticize about an idea.
Sure.
They'll romanticize about doing something like tough, something extreme or hardcore, whatever. And then when the discomfort of actually doing that thing comes in, then it's like, ooh, I don't like this. Because again, it's just like, it's, for instance, like, let's just talk about just general skill building, right? People want skills. It's like, you can look at someone do something when they're very skilled at doing it. And that can be a million things. You could be like riding a horse. I don't have, like, I never rode a horse. I watched your dad ride, and I saw him the way he handles. I mean, that's impressive. Don't know anything about it, but I can appreciate now even more so. But even then, I could see him, and you could appreciate the skill. When you were like working with a horse and doing the shoes and stuff, and you're moving so precisely with your hands. I don't have to know anything about blacksmithing to know, oh man, this guy knows what he's doing. And we can watch anybody in anything do something, and you can appreciate how skilled they are at that. And everybody wants that. Most people, again, you have to kind of choose your suck, so to speak. You got to choose the things that you really enjoy doing, that you'll go through regardless of whether or not like stuff gets tough. But then you've got to put that time in, and the time in is the hard part, because you got to do something for a long time. You're not going to get a pat on the back. It's difficult. It's uncomfortable as you're doing things, as you're trying to do things, and you suck at it, whatever. And whatever. But again, I don't know if maybe it was that, or if simply maybe there was a, it seemed like that B team, they had a lot of friction from the people there too. It seemed like early on. It seemed like the one dude, I mean, the way that at least the editing was, is that the one guy's bossing him around, and everybody's kind of getting irritated. So
yeah,
maybe a little bit all that.
That kind of goes into people, man. I feel like if you're thrown into that environment, you have to be tolerant of other people, and in order to be successful.
Sure.
So back to the original question that you had, another thing that I like to do is I started studying the psychology of interpersonal relationships, right?
That's great.
I started trying to understand. Now, keep in mind, at the time I was going through, before this, so that year prior to the show, I was going through some hard things in my personal life with relationships. So I was trying to be a better man. I was trying to understand dynamics between a relationship, and not just like with your, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, but business, siblings, family is probably one of the most challenging, right? Because you know you're going to love each other. You may not love each other.
You may
all
not
the
always
time.
like each
That's
other.
right.
Right. Like,
That's
yeah.
right.
You know, but you'll be there for them. Yeah.
So I knew going into this, that was going to be a factor, which I didn't want to be so naive to think that, oh, I'll just be able to handle it and, you know, whatever. Because even when I do these other trainings here in Kentucky, there's an element of that. And it's only packed into maybe 3 days, but there could be some frustration.
Start to butt heads.
And yeah, and especially with, I love him to death. My brother, he's come to many trainings with me, but at the same time, I have to be very patient as the big brother, as the leader, and just understand his nonsense. But at the same time, he understands my nonsense and he puts up with my shit. So it's really interesting. So the psychology behind having a team, having a cohesive unit, a bond with people you just don't know. You don't know what they bring to the table. Where I felt like even my team alpha, with when we started as 4, we were pretty strong, and there's some strong personalities there. I feel like I can kind of blend and I can mold and kind of like a chameleon without losing who I am, but I don't necessarily need to dominate. I can lead when I need to, but I can also be led. Right. So it's no different than, I was really impressed too, like years ago when I was running a lot of the Sunday afternoon trainings. That was kind of like my thing. You gave me the ropes to do that, and it was great. And one day you showed it to my class, and I'm like, okay, wow. He's like, not that you're my student, but you're there to participate and do the class.
Sure.
So I still had to represent that leadership role. And so in a team unit, I think it's important to understand that, and not everybody agrees with that. Not everybody is trusting of each other. Luckily for me, so I listen to a lot of books. I know you read a lot. And for me, I actually asked about leadership and how to become a better leader. So Craig Cottle actually gave me a couple things to read. And one of the things I was drawn to was The Dichotomy of Leadership by Jocko Willink.
Yeah, it's a good one.
And so that was very helpful in understanding that. And that book helped me pull through that show in the mental aspect, and for about 90% of it. And so knowing that even though I know what I bring to the table, I can still be successful. I don't have to take control, but there's certain things where I definitely put my foot down and wasn't allowed to be pushed around. And there's other things it's like, okay, I can bend on this. It doesn't have to be my way.
Right.
So that's important too. If you want to be successful, but not everybody understands that, and not everybody agrees with that. So, you know, that you have to navigate around that. So that, back to the mindset, it's one thing that I even am quoted saying, and this isn't mine, this is from my training from, Nature Alliance School, is mindset, tactics, and gear. And I feel like that's essential, especially in the environment that I was in with Outlast.
Now, here's a question for you. If you were to like do it over again, because with the training, getting into it, knowing what you know now and how everything went, would you have tried to like fluff up a little bit and gain some extra fat?
That's what I was thinking too.
Because because the thing is for you guys listening, so like when you came back, you're not a massive guy. You're usually walking around like 150.
Right now I'm probably about 148.
148.
I'm a relaxed, beer drinking, steak eating son of a gun.
So about 150.
Yeah,
yeah. Like
when I'm letting myself
you're letting yourself enjoy life.
Yeah.
And then you would cut down to do competitions and things like that, but you're always, even at your fluffy, right? You're still a pretty lean guy. You got abs, everything else. Yeah. But going into that show where, again, at some point your body's just eating itself, and you came back and you had lost 20 pounds or something, you came back. How much were you when you came back?
I went in weighing 153.
Okay.
And that was just me kind of like cramming at the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And when I came out of the wilderness, I weighed 127 pounds.
Dang. And so that's, and so not just the amount of weight, but the percentage of body weight.
Exactly.
It's huge. Like a 200 plus pound guy losing a little bit, that's okay. They can lose 20 pounds and be all right. You're going from 200 to 180, not too bad. Going from when you're 150s, low 150s to 127, that's rough. That's a lot of weight.
Yeah.
So again, would you have gained more fat and then to sort of like fluff up? And then also, what was that whole experience like of dropping that weight down and everything else?
So to answer your question, yes, I would, if I had to do it all over again, because I was conflicted, because I really didn't know what to do. And that's one thing that was lagging. And for me, I thought I needed to get in pretty decent shape, like almost like competition shape.
Yeah.
So I could just be effective if there was something that we had to run or navigate through or get through. And honestly, the trainings that I had been doing, it was kind of mirrored that. So that's what I was used to. But to answer your question, yeah, I would have fluffed up. I would have tried to get up to like your weight class and have the fat stores to burn, because honestly, when it comes to survival, you want to just do the essential things that you need. You want to get your shelter built. You want to procure water. You want to have some type of way to get fire, right? Those are the three things. And then you'll think about food after you get those first three things done. And if you have the fat stores to kind of rely on, then you're going to have an advantage. And you clearly see that with the guy on Delta team, Jordan.
Yeah.
Great dude. I got to talk to him a little bit. We kind of just mingled a little bit before the show. And I could tell, like, man, he's thin. The other two dudes you're talking about, like on Bravo team, Corey and Tim, they were thin. They were lean. And like you don't have a lot of body fat on you, Eugene. You're pretty thin. You're muscular. You've got a very athletic build. It would be a struggle for you as well. So,
whereas like Paul was a little heavier, and then by the end of the show, you could see his face.
Yeah,
and that was kind of wild watching the show, because as the show went on, you guys became more and more gaunt.
Sunk in,
yeah. But I mean, Paul, like, he had a pretty good amount of fluff, and then he's slimming down.
Yeah.
You know,
Paul, great dude, man. I wish I had more time to spend with him. I love that dude. He lost 42 pounds.
42 pounds.
He was the older gentleman.
He was the older,
and
guy.
That made it all the way through. I remember watching. Well. I guess spoiler alert. You should already watch the show.
Just watch the show. But when that walk, I know you're talking like that walk.
And like the dude the dude is like, there's something to be said about, like, he's like the oldest guy on the show, I think.
Yeah.
And he had some he just seemed like he had some mental fortitude. Like, he had some toughness to him. Like, he could deal with some shit. Like, I think his body, obviously would start to kind of give a little bit in certain, I don't want to give too much away, but like mentally, he was just like kind of, strategy wise, he's like, oh, I gotta switch teams or do this or do that, or I gotta, make the right decisions here. And it seemed like he was thinking a few steps ahead, but also like mentally, it seemed like he didn't quite get shaken very much.
Yeah. So Paul is a very compelling individual, and he played the game perfect.
He did.
He played the game that you would want to play to win. And honestly, some people, it's crazy. Like, you guys both get haters right online. So there's people that talk shit on Paul, but
for what?
Just switching teams but that's part of it, right? That is the whole premise, the idea of the game.
What's the
you don't have to finish with the same team,
right?
And if it's not working out over here on this team, well, you gotta make decisions, tough ones, not easy ones. That's gonna be the betterment for your outcome, and also what you can bring to the table to another team. And that's part of this whole idea of the
calculated
show.
Risk.
Yeah, exactly.
It always reminds me, there's like, I think it was like Indianapolis Colts had this coach, and then I think it was like an interview, because like, he's like, you play to win the game. Like, he kept saying, you play to win the game. That's it. Like, that's the point of this shit, is like to win. And so you have to, sometimes you hurt some feelings, and sometimes you do things that maybe are unfavorable, but you do things to win. And that's the whole point. You're not there to like hurt anybody, but sometimes that shit happens.
Yeah, and nothing's personal, So there was 4 teams: Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, and Delta. And without giving anything away, or spoiler,
We'll just say spoiler alert.
Yeah, I mean, there could be spoilers, in the podcast, but
pause the episode, listen, watch the show.
The interesting thing is that and I said this on another interview, but I was offered to switch teams early on. And it was from Seth. And we had a great conversation across the river. It was like both production teams were on. So Alpha, my team, my production was filming the conversation. Charlie was there filming this conversation back and forth across the river. And it was great. It was a great dialogue between Seth and I. And Seth is on Charlie team, and he'll say this because he's about my size. We're about the same height, but he's like 200.
He's a big guy.
Something pound. Yeah, he's like Damon from the gym.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Just
I
mean,
little
strong,
thick little
dude. That's just I mean, he'd probably be awesome at jiu-jitsu, but and he only lost like 35 pounds. But he said that he didn't really. I mean, yeah, it was difficult. We all, starvation and hunger sucks, but he had the fat reserves to lose, and he could have went another month or two out there, according to him. So, and I'm like, yeah, that's actually smart. But anyway, when he made that offer for me to come over to Charlie, I mean, I had no reason to leave. I wasn't feeling like what Paul felt, so I still had a loyalty to my team, even if there was a little bit of, we bucked heads from time to time, but it wasn't enough to really sour the relationship for me to make a decision thinking, I got to jam, man. I got to get out of here. So I still had a love and a loyalty to the girls on my team because we had a system that worked, and I had no reason to think otherwise. And, for me, I knew that was an option. It was kind of a wild card if I needed it. And if you watch the show, you'll see what happens.
Yeah. What was like, so is there, even though you have the opportunity to switch teams initially, when you get, set into teams, is there just like that instant connection you guys had and you kind of just start like learning about each other and like, you're like, I'm here. Like, is there an initial loyalty just because that's where you were placed? Or, I mean, because you kind of were already thinking a little bit, but you did have some connection to your team.
Yeah.
Like what was that like process? Like, how were you feeling people out?
So for me in the beginning, it was just the commonality with Jill as a very strong alpha woman.
She's from Kentucky.
She's from Kentucky, man. So to me, that's like, all right, if we're in a social setting, right, and you get to meet people and you're kind of talking and you're like, oh, you're from Kentucky? Well, I'm from Kentucky. Well, okay, really? Well, naturally, you kind of want to bond to that person because you share that. And that's what it was for her and myself. And honestly, her skill set is way up there. She knows a lot about her skill set is very impressive. And it only showcased a little bit. I mean, she is an avid archer. She's a competitive athlete. She wasn't really a skilled hunter prior to the show, but she showed that otherwise. So hats off to her. I have to give credit where credit is due, even though like the outcome wasn't the most pleasant one. But for someone that I know I could relate to and know that, okay, her foraging skills, her plant identification, medicinal, it was better than mine. So I knew I could learn from her.
Yeah, I see.
And back to your original question, that was another thing that I did too. I was studying a lot of the plant life in Alaska because there's an abundance of it. And most of it is edible. Even though it's edible, it's not really enough to sustain you. It's just like having a salad, right? Having a salad is okay, but it's really not. It's
not like a steak.
And no, it's not gonna have the nutrients. A salad is a salad. Yeah. So, but with her, so that's why I was drawn to her, and I knew she was a strong team player, which obviously it showed in the show. Whether you like her or not, or you love her or hate her, for me, I was right behind her. And initially, without giving away too much, of the production, we were told that the teams would be picked for us. So a lot of people don't know that. Not only that, there was 20 people that were flown out to Alaska, and then they narrowed it down to 16, 4 teams of 4. So none of us really knew going in, like we didn't know who was going to make it. There was 4 people that were going to go home. Luckily, I was one that was accepted and I was on the show, but 4 people had to go home. And as far as the placement of how we were circled around the initial product or resource drop, she just happened to be right in front of me. I talked with her a little bit prior to the show, realized that she was from Kentucky, said a few words to Paul, a few other guys, Nick, the wrestler. I made a little bit of chit chat with him. Honestly, I love that dude to death because he's great. He's a funny son of a gun. but even the wrestler, I was like, oh, well, I share that commonality.
Yeah.
So,
Share that
but he
affinity with
was across the way. And so when they said, choose your teams now, Jill was reading the note. And so she couldn't choose anybody. She was still reading. So they threw us a curveball. And so naturally, I'm like, well, who's the first person in front of me? I grabbed her. And I felt confident in that. And that's how our team developed. And Amber would grab Jill. And then I felt someone grab me from behind. And it happened to be the guy Lee.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it was just like, that's how the teams were formed.
Yeah. Who is somebody from the show that like, you've gotten a lot of messages on Instagram. You'll post some of that stuff on social media. And I don't know, like what's like some of the stuff's jokey and some of it's serious. Like, is there someone like on the show that you kind of did not like, that you kind of had like almost like you were enemies with?
Well, the pictures that I've seen a lot of are the two dudes, and everybody makes like it's some love affair going on or something. And when I saw the clothes though, that was one thing. I saw the one guy, he had on the sleeveless jacket.
What?
Yeah.
I was like, "You're in Alaska,
yeah, Brian.
why did you bring that?"
Is the one with the little goatee, like that, like a little.
Yeah,
they called him Rambo. Like,
yes.
Why did you come in here like into Alaskan rainforest where it's gonna
look good, bro?
Brian from Florida.
Yeah.
So, so
the guns off.
It's all friendly / unfriendly banter, right?
Okay.
And so, some people might think that that's bullying. But those are just betas, right? So alpha can bully. But here's what it comes down to. So there was a little friendly banter between Brian and Javier. And Javier is a guy that looks great on the show, right? He looks like the type of dude that got done dirty and this and that. But really, there's some underlying things, right? And so
I actually looked at the show and thought that he was kind of irritating because because you it looked to me like he ran part of his team off pretty early, and then there was always this sort of this moral virtue signaling. I would never do this, and of course this is what our society, part of it's become. When you think about what people do, you see people post things on social media and they say things on TV and you're like, well, of course, it's like, I don't think that you should do bad things to children. Well, of course, who does? Or I think you should be nice to people. Of course, but they'll obviously say this in different terms, but they say things that of course most people agree with. So no one's going to combat that. It's just virtue signaling. It's just like you're saying things because you want to look good and so you can get likes and you can get attention and you can get people to agree with you. But I saw that on the show and it was, when he's this competition just brings out the worst. No, it doesn't. Competition typically brings out all kinds of good things. And what's going on is not evil. It's not bad. It's a game. And you probably, like you said, you wouldn't be complaining if you were winning. You're just complaining because you're not in the driver's seat right now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I was willing to take the risk and do the dirty work and be villainized based on the decisions that I made. And so to answer your question,
but going back to Javier, sorry.
But no, it's you bring up a great point because that's 100%. And that banner of moral virtue, that flag that you're waving, because it's just drawn attention to you to put you on a pedestal to say, hey, look at me. I'm not a villain. I'm actually this good guy.
I'm a good guy, yeah.
I have no flaws. Horseshit, right? Everybody has flaws.
Everyone.
Right? And if you're not willing to own up to that, and if you're not willing to expose that on a television show, and you want to play that card, well, I think most people are going to see through that. And so for me, it's more or less, I just hijacked the banter between the two because it was pretty friendly and clean between Brian and Javier because Brian left the show. Javier was left solo. All right, kind of spoiler alert. And he had tough decisions to make and it stressed him out, man. And so seeing the show and watching how he processed that and the way he handled it, well, then all of a sudden, well, I just want to seek vengeance. I want to get Alpha Team. I want to fuck them over. Oh, okay. What about your moral virtue, dude? Yeah. Okay. So it's bullshit, right? You're waving this, you have this facade that you don't want to take ownership of, even when you might be at a low point. You might want to steal something. You might want to take something away from someone because you're hitting a reset button. You're taking away a resource and you're going to be villainized, but you don't want to be that bad guy. You want to paint this picture that you're this good, virtuous man that would never harm anybody. And for both of those two dudes.
Well, even that's one thing. So there's that one challenge, and we won't talk about it, but there's the one challenge where, you went out and you went and got those darn crabs and you brought them back and gave them some. And you could have said, no, I'm not going to do that. You were honorable. You said, hey, I said I was going to give you, I gave you my word. Here you go. And you could have just said, no crab for you.
Yep.
And then there was the young woman who, killed it in that challenge. And she took multiple spots with she bought multiple like little traps with her.
She took the 3 of the 5.
She took resources from other people. You took the ability for them to stay warm, but she took the ability for them to feed themselves. Well, you're taking resources.
Yep.
And it's just interesting how, again, this is the magic of like spinning things around, right? How you can make one person look, in that sense, it was like this big achievement. She did it, and then it's you're like this evil villain. Like, well, it's the same thing. You're just taking resources from people, and so I just thought it was interesting. So the way that was, taken care of, but yeah, it's just moral virtue signaling.
Yeah, and it's an interesting take that you have on that, because when you break it down, at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that people were thinking about, but it wasn't in the spotlight. And if you go back and you watch the show, which I went back and I watched the show a second time, and there was things that I caught that I didn't catch the first time. It's like in anything you watch,
sure,
right?
Of course.
And there was a part that was said from Dawn that she was willing to steal the crab pots. Right. And a lot of people, it's easily to overlook that and not even see it. Like, you get a little distracted from something and you might not even catch that. But that thought was there on her. So would that change the dynamic of their team? Now, Paul, on the other hand, was like, oh, you don't want to open that can of worms. So he was still playing a fair game. He didn't really want to go down that road if he didn't have to. And I think most people don't want to have to resort to those type of tactics unless they're pushed to it. I know for most people, no one wants to have to do that. But in a real survival situation, right? Friends, family are going to bond together. Everyone else, enemy, it's about resources. How can you provide for your family? How can you feed yourself and your family? Anyone else, if I have to make someone else suffer to provide for mine, you're damn right I'm going to do it. Now, I'll be diplomatic about it and I won't try to hurt anybody. But at the same time, and I'm not being selfish, maybe I am, but I'm providing for the people that I love and I care about. And that could be obviously my direct family and also my friends. And in a team situation, that sense of loyalty, you want to do the same thing. So waving that flag and all that, it's just a bunch of nonsense. So I try not to do that. On the banter on Instagram, because I find that shit funny. All the haters I get, and and Paul actually said, he's like, I've seen you turn haters into people that end up following you and like have a change of heart. It's like, yeah, because I don't take it personal. I know where they're coming from, the psychology, right? I come from a place of like, I understand it's all emotion. It's not real. It's a thought process. Here's based off of something that they like are triggered by. So it's like, okay.
But here's another thing about that too. Sometimes, in a lot of cases, more than people would like to admit, a lot of times the things that bother us, it's because it's a projection of ourselves. Right. It's because it's in that person. There's something about us that we don't like. Maybe we have the same qualities that person that showed, and we don't like that about ourselves. So therefore we hate it on that person even more. Or on the flip side, sometimes it's the other way where we wish we could do that. We wish we could do that. Right. So like, for instance, a lot of men have been made to be like, just be nice and be nice all the time, right? Men, we have testosterone, we have that ability to fight, that ability to be defiant, right? And a lot of times it's taken away from us in society. So sometimes when men see it, you're being awfully mean. You're like, no, he's being defiant, right? He's going about this thing a little differently, and maybe you don't like it because you want to be defiant. Sometimes you want to go to your boss and tell him to screw off, but you don't.
Right?
You're nice. right?
Too
And so
agreeable.
You're agreeable, but sometimes you don't want to be, but you just do it anyway because society says be agreeable. So sometimes it feels good to just step down your foot and say, no, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I see those messages that you post and I'm thinking, I wonder who this person is. And I wonder if it's because maybe they are this way, like Dawn. Okay, you're ready to steal.
Mm-hmm.
I just did it 1st,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like, but now you're mad at me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So now she's mad at you, but you're the same person.
Yeah.
Or it's like, are you this person that sees in this person someone that you want to be? And so it makes you angry because you want to do something like that. Not necessarily want to still, stell something or whatever, but you want to do something that's that's tough, that's aggressive. You want to be aggressive at whatever it is that you're doing, or you want to be defiant, but you don't because you're going to be nice. So I think sometimes it's those things. It's a reflection of us,
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of cases.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. And I'm just, for me, it's like, there's a time where you can be nice and there's a time you're like, all right, it's not
pick your battles.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
yeah.
plus you were on limited time too.
Yeah.
You getting skinnier by the day. You don't exactly have months to fight this thing out. You've got to let's speed this process up a bit.
And I'll tell you this too, is so with my team, and there's a lot of, so on the show, you see like what you see and you can't really take it for face value.
Sure. It's a show.
It's a show. Behind the scenes, I mean, they had 8 episodes, 6, maybe 7 hours total. That's what from episode 1 to 8 is.
God, of hundreds of thousands of hours.
And
Jesus.
there was a lot of talk with Jill and Amber and I, because my other teammate Lee, he left early on, like the 4th day. So when it came down to us 3, like I said earlier, we trim the fat. Like our team. I knew these 2 women, like they were going to be there to the bitter end. And so I respected them. And I knew that they were strategic players. They were on board with my ideas. And Jill was ultimately the leader. And I was okay with that because I could lead. Like when I did my mission, it was my lead. And there was a little animosity there, as his show showed, and it was pretty rough, but it was okay because I wasn't it didn't bother me one bit. But I knew that if the situation was different, it would have been a real hard challenge for the opposing team.
Yeah.
But it didn't work out that way, and I think that that's what made the show great, because there were so many changes. And I think that a lot of people will view the show and hate it and love it at the same time, because back to your point, like, you want to be that certain person. You want to tell your boss to go to hell, but you got to comply. So where do you draw the line? Do you take that role and say, okay, yeah, I'm just going to tell you to screw off because I know I can be more and be better, or do I just kind of play this game? So, and there's a little bit of both of that on,
sure, of course,
from everybody. So
as there has to be in a society, we have to work together. I'm not calling for people to be jerks or anything like that, because we all have to, like you said, there's all kinds of times where you have to just kind of be in your spot, and we can't all be chiefs. Sometimes we got to be Indians too, right? We got to step in line and just follow the lead and everything.
Absolutely.
else.
Yeah.
There was we talk about resources. That's an interesting thing you kind of keep bringing back up. You took some time, you took a lot longer to do certain things, spend a little more time, to create your raft and things like that. However, you got stranded when you kind of did your little mission. Talk about like coming back. So you had to go across some pretty cold water.
Shit.
You're kind of already low on resource. You're already in there for a little while. You guys have been doing this thing.
2 weeks to the day.
Yes. So 2 weeks. You're already in there. You're already starting to lose some weight, lose some resources. You're probably hungry. You've been waiting. You've been hiding. Now you got to get your gear and head back. What was that like? The mental state you're in. And also, like, was there any doubts about making it back?
Yes and no.
All right.
So it was still uncertain.
That was one of my favorite parts of the show, I think, just because it was you, first of all, and I thought it was a badass thing you did.
We've shared a lot of time on the mats. We have, relationships. So
it's very cool to see.
Yeah, we see him like running through the water like a gangster.
I was like, look at him.
Let's go.
I was like, Justin looks ripped up. I don't care how skinny you were. Abs were out. And I was like, all right, let's go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shirt off. Let's go.
I was comp ready as far as weight class.
Yeah,
goes.
right.
You were ready to go, man.
So, yeah. So, were there any doubts? No doubt in my mind that the mission wouldn't be successful. I knew that I was going to be able to get across no matter what the outcome. And I had
Gotcha.
prepared mentally to cross that river.
Mm.
I figured at some point in time it was going to happen. I just didn't know when.
How far was it? Like how much distance?
Maybe 100 yards.
Okay.
I was in that. So I had to cross the river. That water temperature was 37 degrees.
That's cold, man.
Cold, baby.
That is cold.
That's cold, bro.
The only reason I know that is because I asked. I wanted to know. So on the show, there's people in place, safety, without giving too much away. And I don't think Netflix are going to be upset about this, but they have our asses covered.
Just in case.
In the event something goes south, they are taking care of us.
Mm-hmm.
They're getting us to safety. If it's a medical procedure, because I mean, keep in mind, like there's bears out there. There's a lot of hazardous, problematic things that could go wrong really fast. Hypothermia being one. So crossing the river, I knew that I had to prepare myself physically. Mentally, I knew it's no different than us doing ice baths, right? Doing the cold plunges. We've done those. I've been doing those for years. We've done them at Derby City, done them at home, done them in Costa Rica. So I knew that I could handle it. But exhausting myself crossing the river in that type of cold was a whole nother challenge. But anyway, back to like asking the safety and asking one of the boat hands, like, how cold is this water? I had a temperature gauge, 37 degrees, Justin. I was also in the water for almost 8 minutes. Hypothermia sets in between minute 5 and 7, right? For someone who's unprepared. Now, the show doesn't show this, but at the same time, before I crossed that river, I had prepared myself. I knew mentally I was going to get across there. If I could have just swam across with nothing, I'd have been fine. It'd have been okay. No big deal. But pulling a raft that weighed approximately maybe 100 pounds, because that was a lot of alderwood, which is kind of a common tree in Alaska. Alder, you have western hemlock and a lot of spruce trees. Even though alderwood is kind of light, a bunch of it in a triangular format, it adds a lot of weight. There was 2 layers to it, plus 3 inner tubes. So the reason why it took so long to build my raft, a day and a half, is because we were issued 4 inner tubes. During the process of building the raft, I popped one of the inner tubes. So I had to change my initial build from what I had planned to different, and to make sure that this raft was going to be good enough and strong enough to float all 3 of us, because I had 2 women that were pretty light, right? Lighter than me. So I'm like, well, I'm going to build this thing to where if we have to, all 3 of us get on here, it'll be fine. And we can navigate. And because I didn't know what challenges were going to be in front of us.
Right. You were looking at that as a tool for the future.
Yeah. So taking my time, and, maybe I'm a perfectionist. I don't know. I'm methodical in my approach to building, and being a blacksmith, or semi-retired now, like building horseshoes. It's not just, you don't just whip through it. You actually, there's movements. There's strategic hammer swings. There's a lot of practical application to building something.
Yeah.
And it's no different than jiu-jitsu, right? You're not just going to start throwing mud at the wall and hopefully I sweep this guy. No, you're going to set up your grips. You're going to set up your movements, especially at our level, black belt. So, crossing that river, I was able to do, and the show didn't show this, and I was thinking maybe they would, but maybe not. I did some Wim Hof breathing. I did a 3-round session.
Sure.
I mean, I did it I felt like I was
buzzed,
floating.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I was like, I was really, really getting into it. And because I knew that the water was cold, I knew I was going to have to pull something. And I didn't know what the outcome was, but all I knew is that I wasn't really attached to the result at the end. I just knew that I could get across there and I could do it. And my mind was done made up. So mentally I overcame it, but physically, man, my body it wore out. And when I did get to the other side, I struggled. It took me a while to warm up. I was not in a good spot. So,
Sure,
and the show didn't show all that, and that's fine. But at the same time, like me warming up by the fire.
Oh, bro.
I was there for like 5 hours, man.
I'm sure.
I mean, it took a long time. Like when we get out of the ice baths, dude, it takes about an hour to warm up, even in Costa Rica.
Oh, bro. Well, I mean, like even at home. So I've been, I've got the ice stuff there, and when I use, one of the ice baths, get in there, and I mean, right now I've got the temperature around 40.
Yes,
it's cold. It's pretty cold,
Yeah.
But even when I had it like 45, I was in there, and I mean, if I jump in there, because I don't want to, because I found if I do it too late, it messes my sleep, because you get a big dump of adrenaline. But if I do it, say in the early afternoon, and I'll jump in there and I'll do maybe 2 rounds of like 2 minutes or something like that, or a round of 3 minutes and the round of like 1.5 minutes or something, just something like that. I don't try to do it too long. I mean, when I'm done, my body, like I'm not 100% warm back to normal for a while.
Yep.
I'll go inside and I'll put on a sweater and just kind of let my body heat up, and then after I'll take it back off. But I'm still a little chilly for a while, so I couldn't imagine being in there for 8 minutes. While you have very little body fat on you, and you're in a rainforest, so it's going to be hard to get warm. You know what I mean? So it's not like you can just go into your indoor heating and snuggle up under the covers with a hot meal or anything like that. That's intense.
Yeah, there was zero comfort. So imagine that, right?
Yeah.
You get the comfort from an ice bath that you choose to do, and then once you come out, it's like, okay, well, I can warm up. I can put a sweatshirt on. I can go inside. I can crank the heat up. I can, warm up. The fingers and toes was probably one of the hardest things to ever get warm. And when I came off the show for about roughly, I would say almost 6 months, because it was a constant of just being cold, the neuropathy that I suffered in my toes, it was somewhat concerning. And so like going into the river, honestly, it was stupid. It wasn't the best thing, but at the time I felt like it was what I needed to do for the betterment of my team and to progress the game forward. And I was able to make the team much more comfortable. So, I mean, that has to do with like a sleeping bag, right? We weren't issued anything for the first 4 or 5 nights. When people started dropping, they had a resource drop, one of which, every team got sleeping bags.
Oh, so you didn't have sleeping bags the first few nights?
The first 4 nights.
Whoa.
No, first 5 nights. Yeah. So
I didn't realize
the
that.
first resource, let me back up. The second resource drop, because the first one was the initial day of us dropping into the field.
Right.
And then we go to our locations to find our camps and set up shelter. On that note, for Alpha Team, it was the most challenging because the terrain just sucked. We were on a side of a hill next to the river. There was nothing flat. It was all covered in Devil's Club, which if you don't know what Devil's Club, imagine a prickly, thorny bush, or not bush, it's a stalk that just is evil. And it's the devil, literally named Devil's Club. And if you touch it, you brush up against it, it gets into you. It's like touching fiberglass. It's hard to get out. Your fingers get almost what looks like an infection. They puff up, they swell up. It doesn't go away. I had it in me for even a month or so after I left the show. I was picking little pieces out. If you've ever been to a tropical place such as like Hawaii or even Costa Rica, they have the little sea urchins.
Yeah.
They're little spiny creatures. You step on one, those suckers are hard to get out. So it's very similar to that. But so I was able to see every single camp, Alpha, Bravo, Delta, and Charlie. I was the only person on the show that actually was able to see every single camp at some point in time during the show. Our setup was the worst. So we had the odds against us. Now, I'm not making any excuses.
Just is what it is.
It was a challenging environment for everyone, but our setup was by far like it sucked the worst. So all that to be said, I don't know, I kind of lost my train of thought, but
so I was like about the resource drop because I didn't realize you guys
the sleeping bags,
sleeping bags in the beginning.
Sleeping bags. So the first 4 or 5 nights, everybody suffered. It was cold, it was miserable, it was wet, and once we got the sleeping bags, that was like a sense of comfort. And so it just made us a little bit more comfortable at night when we could sleep and not have to rely on fire throughout the night.
Right. So it wasn't so you could actually sleep. you know, and actually get some sleep. Because because I mean, sleep is, you start having sleep deprivation, bro. That's something. You know, like you go a night without sleep, gets worse. Go another night without sleep.
Yeah, the first 48 hours was the most challenging because, like I said before, the first night I had maybe 1 hour of sleep. Second night, an hour, maybe 2, and we all just cuddled up the best we could to preserve body heat. And even then, I mean, the wind is a factor, and the wind is the worst. When it's cold and it's raining and it's a wet environment, and then you get the wind, it just goes right through you. And even the gear that I had, which I'm very proud to represent some of the brands that I represent, and the gear that I have, it definitely helped. And having wool gear in a cold environment, wet environment such as Alaska, it makes all the difference in the world.
So here's a question for you. And this this could be multiple things, but either how has this show changed you? You know, because you go through a pretty tough experience like that, you know, that lasted, what is it, roughly about a month? You know,
a little over a month. Yeah, I was in Alaska 47 days.
47 days. So you go through that kind of experience. I mean, you come out on the other end a different person. You know, you're not, of course, we're the same person, but you going through some stuff. You have some experiences that are incredibly unique, once in a lifetime type things. Like you're going to be a little different. So either how has the show changed you, or is there something that you maybe think you gained from the show? Maybe it could be both, you know, but just sort of some thoughts there. Because when you were talking about like the neuropathy, you're talking about losing all this weight. And I know you struggled with getting back to eating afterwards, but then also maybe it benefited you in some areas because you're like, okay, like maybe it gave you time to think about things a certain way, or whatever, you know? So what are your thoughts on that?
So how it's changed me, that's a great question. You know, I feel like for me, I have a whole new respect and appreciation for just life in general, and being the person that I am. And I'm not 100% like happy with the way I've done things throughout life.
Sure.
So I felt like, okay, this show was helpful for me to be way more than what I think I'm capable of doing, because this was one of the most challenging things I've ever done. And so for me, there's things that I still want to accomplish, that I still want to do. And it's not to gain fame or chasing clout chasing or anything like that. It's cool that I'm getting the attention, but at the same time, at the end of the day, I still kind of I like going to the grocery store and not being recognized. I like just being my own little world. But it's also made me just appreciate little things in life. And what I mean by that is little things that we take for granted. So we,
like comfort,
Americans, yes, Americans, we waste so much. And I'm not going to try to get on some soapbox right now, but at the same time, I'm very cognizant of how wasteful we are.
Sure.
And so there's a lot of things that I think Americans do, and we have it pretty damn good. And I think the way the society is and the way the world is, and we have a lot of complainers out there.
Sure.
And I feel like that I surround myself with people that are good people, right? That hold me accountable. And if I start to slide one way or the other, that they'll tell me, hey, Justin, you know, here's a reality check. So for me, it's just being a little bit more appreciative of simple little things that that I'm willing to admit to myself that I'm not capable of, and it pushes me to be a little bit more capable. Like my capability of one, being a better man, being a better father, being a better businessman, being better on the mat, even competition. I have some goals personally that I'd like to obtain, some of which I know, you know,
sure,
at belt levels and hitting, and I've been failing at those, honestly, and that's okay because I know what I need to work on. So it's just going to push me to become better. Even at my age, you know, in my mid 40s, I feel like I've kind of hit a stride that I need to harness and just ride it out the best I can, because when you get to a certain level, a certain age, you notice that you're up against like age. You hit a wall in a way, but it doesn't have to be detrimental to your mental like fortitude of pushing through that. Like I like David Goggins and I take him with a grain of salt, but a lot of his content and what he's talking about is all mental. And while I was on the show, something that resonated with me before I left, and it just happened to be like a few days, and I've heard it before, but he talks about the 40% rule. Most people only, when they feel like they're reaching their breaking point at their demise or their end, they're really only at 40%.
Sure.
And I feel like even on the mat, man, I went and did open mat on Sunday, and I feel like I'm a little out of shape.
Yeah.
I'm not pudgy, but I'm definitely not in competition shape.
Sure.
Right? Since Pan Am's, which was 6 weeks ago. But I remember thinking like, yeah, I'm definitely out of shape, but some of the guys I'm rolling with here, like they were coming after me, which is typical, right? To come after an upper belt, right? To prove to themselves, you know? And I remember being at that same mental spot of like, I gotta like give them the business because I'm a lower belt and I can't let the upper belt. Yeah, I got to prove something. But at the same time, I was comfortable with that and understanding that, you know, that's just part of the evolvement of progression. So
plus a lot of guys respect you. And so, you know what I mean? Like it's one of those things where, you know, you want to perform well against people that you respect. You know, because a lot of times, like, you know, for instance, if you have a coach and you're feeling good, you're going to try to go a little harder, not because you're trying to like, you know, beat the coach and be like, I beat you, you suck, whatever, but because you're like, look, man, I'm getting better. And, you know, I respect your game. So I want to test my game against yours because I do respect what you bring to the table. So it allows me to have a good, you know, sort of idea of where I am. You know what I mean? It's like when you watch like all the old martial arts movies, right? Like they don't, there's always a montage, of course, right? And the montage always has the sequence of the student who starts to get the better of the mentor. Right, as he is supposed to.
Sure.
Right, it's not a bad thing. You know what I mean? And I think sometimes people, not that you don't do this, but I've gotten messages from people, and they sometimes get upset about it. Like, no, this is what they're going to do because they're trying to test themselves. They respect you. Yeah. You know, I think it's a sign of respect more so than a sign that they're trying to like chop your head off and then hold it over your face or something.
Yeah, it's like getting caught by a lower belt, you know. And I remember the first time that happened with me. Yeah. I was like, oh shit. Oh yeah, that's what that feels like. And it was a purple belt. And I remember when I was a purple belt, and the first time I ever tapped a black belt, I'm like, oh, so it kind of like the role was reversed. I'm like, and equally so, I had the respect for the purple belt.
Sure.
At the gym. And at the same time, like mentally, and I joke with this particular person, like, never again. Now, that's just would take that with a grain of salt because it will probably happen again.
Well, of course, we're just talking
multiple times.
Talking
but
to each other,
now it's like, okay, you're at that level. I can't play with you, right? So
correct.
But yeah, I mean, all in all, I love that. And so for like back to your question, you know, it's sharpened me in ways. I've pursued other things. I feel like I want to be, and I'm not some crazy like prepper or anything, but I want to be capable of many things, and not to show off. It's because I want to have the capability of skills that I feel like I can feel confident in any situation. One of which is being more tactical, right? As far as being able to be proficient with a weapon, with a gun and a pistol. And some people may not agree with that, and that's okay. But for me, in my life, in my world, and it's not to show off, it's just that's a skill set that I want to get up to the level where I feel like black belt level, right? And I don't want to make a career out of it. I don't really care or aspire to be like a firearms instructor, but I want to be proficient at that, just as I was as a blacksmith and as a black belt in jiu-jitsu. And it's to get my skills where I feel like I'm lacking in life, to bring that up to a point where I feel like it's going to be a practical skill that I can utilize if I ever have to if I have to depend on it.
Mm.
And so for me, it just was kind of an eye opener. And I realized I had to get real honest with myself in a lot of things. And even in the survival world, there's things that I still want to work on, like plant life and recognizing, the type of medicinal and herbal vegetation. Like that's a whole world that people are excellent at. And, I'd like to at least get more than just a rudimentary understanding of it. So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of opened up a door for me to become, understanding like what I'm capable of, my capabilities. And I know that where I lack and where I'm good, and I want to bring some things up, and I'm okay with the things that I suck at. I just know that I've got a lot to work on.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's cool. The Stoics, a lot of times like Marcus Aurelius and all these guys, and Seneca was famous with it. He would purposely, have these little bouts of time where he would, wear the plainest clothes, eat the most basic foods, because he was a rich dude, very wealthy guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so he would purposely do all this stuff to make himself like a poor guy, a homeless guy kind of thing, just because he wanted to remind himself of, how good he had it.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's one of those things where, like you said, for some of the people that live in America, if you've never traveled outside of the country, sometimes you don't realize how good you have it. I'm not saying like we could always improve, and I'm always about that, right? But we have an amazing place. We have this amazing place that has tons of stuff. People are still dying to get here.
Mm-hmm.
And, like you think about, like I heard a comedian say this. He's like, man, like we've got it so good that one of the biggest killers in our country is obesity. Like he said, people are going up there to St. Peter, they got some guy someone's like, how'd you get here? Oh, starvation. I couldn't eat. He was like, how'd you get here? Snacks. It's so, it's never happened in history.
Opposite ends of the spectrum there, man.
So, I mean, you have abundance and you go through a situation like that where, even like when I would go camping and hiking for maybe a week at a time or something, I've done some of those when I was in my younger days. You'd still go home and be like, oh, this is the best hot shower.
Right.
This is the best meal you had, because you have an appreciation for it, and even when you go like on a diet for competition and you have a big juicy burger afterwards, man, that's a great burger, and
It tastes better.
it's a beautiful thing to go through those periods of time with the struggles so that you can have some appreciation for like just how good you do have it. I
think that's why we do jiu-jitsu in a lot of ways. It scratches that itch of doing something very, like you said, that inoculation to stress, to doing difficult things. I think you constantly are kind of sharpening yourself a little bit, and you have to do that. I think because then you can kind of get, soft, you get kind of less resilient to things. And I think that one of the things that draws me to jiu-jitsu that I initially didn't know I needed was that forcing myself to do something that maybe I wouldn't go out of my way to do. But once you kind of do it and it becomes part of and that's where a good gym comes in, a good coaches and stuff like that, where you have an actual, like an environment that's conducive to that. And maybe that's why people quit jiu-jitsu. I don't know. But like for some of us that stick around to black belt and beyond, it just becomes so much more than obviously belts, but it becomes something about our life that it scratches a certain itch in our life in a way. And also, like you said, we want to be better human beings. We want to appreciate, I want to appreciate being able to go and take a nice shower after a tough training session. It gives you that contrast of, gosh, got my face beat in by somebody, now I feel like I can relax and at least kind of I always tell Chewy this all the time. Like one of my favorite things to do is after a tough training session. It used to be on Saturdays. We'd when he was there, like he'd
shower beer.
No, no, it would be like after a tough training session, like the sun would be out and we'd all be kind of relaxing and just having good conversation. That was one of my favorite things, like talking, just everybody's really relaxed afterwards. But you've done something very, very difficult and very challenging. And I think there's some reward that comes in, and that's some of that is just doing something so difficult is rewarding too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's like even in a competition environment, you go out there, you compete, even if you win or if you lose, you're still, you feel like, okay, yeah, I just did that thing. And let's just say you go out there and you win, 3 or 4 matches, and you're still thinking like, okay, you still want that improvement.
Yeah.
I mean, if you lose, obviously, no matter how you lose, if you get tapped out or if you lose by disqualification or advantage point or whatever it may be. Yeah, man. So to your point, like, that's why I did this show. That's why I wanted to test myself. I wanted to make sure that, one, that I could prove to myself that I was capable of following through.
Yeah.
And in the back of my mind, I knew it, but I just had to go out and try it and see, so
Prove it to yourself.
yeah. And it's nothing other than that. It's just, I like a challenge. I like a hard challenge to some degree, within reason. And honestly, I didn't really know what I was getting into. So kind of exploring that unknown, and it was outside of my comfort zone. For me, it just made sense. And, that's kind of how life is. And I feel like this situation, it was a real way to test the skills that I had developed throughout like kind of a lifetime. And then obviously falling back into it, and then really knowing that, okay, knowing what works, knowing what doesn't. And then at the end of the day, the most challenging part would be the psychological part of it. Just the dealing with people, right? And I think that's universal.
Under high level stress.
That's so crazy to think about.
Someone starving, wet, cold environment, just all the stresses. And that's why people quit, because they're like, nah, this ain't for me. Ain't worth it. Ain't worth $1 million. I don't care. I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna go back to that comfort, to that hot shower.
Shoot, man, I get hangry just sometimes missing a meal, Sure.
Yeah.
So 47 days in Alaska. What's your first meal? Like when you're done and you're like, I'm ready to eat some food. What's your first meal? Like what did you eat?
I'll tell you. So when I left the show, when I left the game board and came back to this little town in Alaska called Hoona, which was about a 30-minute boat ride inside the Neka Bay, the company, Netflix and the production company provided me everything. They took care of us, all the contestants, and they gave me a meal that I wasn't ready for, right? A heavy starch pasta with greasy meat. And I mean, it looked awesome, right? I'm like, oh, I'm going to tear this up. But I couldn't finish a quarter of it.
Wow.
Because my stomach
has shrunk so much.
As soon as I started eating it, I started feeling that, the moment you start to eat and you're feeling like, oh, I'm getting a little full, that happened so quick.
Wow.
For me.
Okay.
But I pushed past that a little bit.
Oh, no.
And almost made myself feel a little sick. But I'm like, okay, I need to back off.
Just lay down and just,
It gets worse though, dude. So, and that's the meal that they gave me. And then one of the gals that was working with production, they're taking care of me. They're checking in on me. She's like, would you like a beer? I'm like, hell yeah,
I'd love a beer.
Yeah, exactly. So it was a Sam Adams strong beer, right? And haven't drank in 30 plus days. So
okay, that's just gonna go straight to the head.
Yeah, I had half of that beer. I'm like, oh, dude, I can't finish it. I just started feeling bloated. Wow. So about an hour passes. Where I was staying is this little hotel, this little town called Hoona, which I already mentioned. There's nothing there. The only way you could get to the town was by boat or plane. So it was away from Juneau. And so I was going to be, basically not really landlocked, but I mean, I was in this little town until otherwise. So all I had to do was kind of just hang out. That night, once that meal kind of like, I couldn't finish it. So I put it in the little fridge, and I'm like, later, about an hour and a half later, I started getting hungry again. I'm like, well, I don't want to eat that because it's too heavy. It's too greasy. Right. In my mind, I'm playing tricks on myself. In the hotel I was staying, there was a bar attached. So I'm like, well, the bar was still open. I'm like, all right, I need to get out. I need to do something because I've been in the hotel for like 5 hours. It's almost midnight. I go to the bar, and it's just a bunch of drunks. It's a bunch of people, like kind of locals hanging out, playing pool, doing whatever. It's kind of like a dive place. And so I'm making small talk with the bartender, and I'm like, you know what? I would like another beer. I'd like to try this again. And they don't know anything. They just think I'm some random drifter or whatever. So I order a Corona, and I'm having the Corona, and then all of a sudden I get the hunger urge again. Right. So I order some bar food, some greasy fries and some chicken strips. Good idea at the time. Right.
Is, yeah.
And we could have that right now, not be faced by it.
And this is where you messed up.
Yeah. And that was, it was terrible. It made me sick.
I bet.
So keep in mind, prior to all that, I was struggling because of the fish that I ate. The salmon that we had caught on the show, when we smoked the salmon, which, I mean, that's what you want to do just to preserve the salmon so it doesn't go bad. The girls, my teammates, they were able to smoke their salmon first. Jill smoked hers, then Amber smoked her fish, and then I was the last to smoke my fish. Well, during that process, I had a piece of fish, whether it was theirs or mine or whatever. I can't remember. I didn't steal anything from them and no fish or anything, but I did have a piece of fish that was not all the way smoked. It was undercooked. If you would eat that in a normal situation, you'd probably get mild food poisoning. Not eating, and then going from eating the first night, eating fish that we cooked that's oily, right? Coho salmon. That's just going to tear your gut up, right? At least it didn't me, because I'm, being the metabolism, having the metabolism that I have, and not making any excuses, but that was what I was dealing with. And I knew it. And I had been dealing with some other issues physically that I didn't want to disclose to production, because I didn't want to leave the show and go out like a bitch.
What were you dealing with?
Feeling like I was going to faint, seeing black spots. I was struggling.
Like black spots? You mean like the black spots where sometimes if you stand up too quick, sometimes you see them for a second?
But imagine that, but it's like camouflage patterns.
All the time.
You look up in the sky, or you just look, if I look at you, I wouldn't see your face. I would just see like your outline and then have to like focus. So times like that, right? Where cognitively we were all fading. We were all struggling, but I was aware of it, and I knew I was reaching the end. Right. And so I wasn't necessarily trying to hide from the safety team, the EMTs out there, but I was trying to hide from them. So, I mean, I was in a way where I was like, all right, I'm not going to jeopardize my health to a point. But in my mind, Dave Goggins, 40% rule, I was like, I can push through.
I'm only 40% there. It's like, maybe not.
When really I'm probably like 70, 80%.
Yeah.
I'm close. I'm reaching the end. So, for me, all that to the bar and eating that greasy food, it just, man, it was like a volcano inside my body. And I realized it. And then I thought, okay, I can't do this shit. I got to put like better food in. I got to eat some salad. I got to eat some vegetables. I got to eat some fruit. So I went to the grocery store the next day and started eating some stuff. But then I saw Oreo cookies, and I saw Reese's, and I saw this shit that you dream about, that you talk about, and you really just, when you're in that situation, all you do is talk about food and all the shit that you're going to eat. It's no different than like having that burger.
When you're cutting weight, there'd be that thing where when, you or I, if we were cutting weight or we were getting ready for compete, even when you're competing, even if you're not cutting weight, if you're around the same weight, you want to eat good food leading up to it. So you kind of, you sacrifice, you say, I'm not going to eat this junk for a while. And then, I remember we would go compete, we'd have our gold medals, and we're like, all right, what are we going to eat? Or I'm going to get this, I'm going to get a milkshake, and then you're just ready to go.
If we're in Arizona, California, or anywhere out west, it's In-N-Out burger, man, right?
In-N-Out burger,
yeah. I mean, and it's not healthy. It's a greasy, fattening, juicy burger.
Well, I remember when we competed at Nogi Pans in 2020, I had leaned out for that competition to get down, and so my diet had been like precise for 3 months.
Yeah.
I mean, eating good food, even like when Jess and I would have our date nights and have cheat meals, we were eating sushi, or we were having this place in here that's like Cuban food that they make it's like pretty clean the way they make it. So the food wasn't that bad. We weren't eating any greasy stuff. I remember we went to that burger place afterwards in Atlanta. And I remember afterwards, like I struggled finishing it because it was just so greasy and heavy, and it was delicious, but I was struggling.
Yeah. So imagine that, Chewy, times 10.
Yeah, man, that's insane. That's intense.
Your mind says yes, but your body's just like, nope, not having it. And then, not to get gross, but like I had some physical issues afterwards for a while that were concerning.
Mm.
And so I had to get my mind into a place that I had to have a better relationship with food because it went south pretty quick.
Okay. Wow.
And so, yeah. And keep in mind, so once I got back here to Kentucky, like a week later, it was Thanksgiving. And so Thanksgiving, what
Jeez.
most Americans do, right?
Yeah.
Just gorge on the Thanksgiving feast. So it wasn't a good environment, and it was hard for me to process and just be disciplined.
Mhm.
And I
And
lacked
not eat too much.
I lacked in
Yeah.
that. And so, you know, I mean, I can understand. I totally get why people have eating disorders. And so it had, you know,
Maybe gives you a little
whole,
empathy there.
yeah, whole new respect and whole new understanding for that. And even now, like as I am now, I still have that temptation to just eat shitty foods, but I know I don't go too far
Mhm.
into it. You know, like I might have a couple cookies and
Right. Give it its rightful place.
yeah,
Moderation.
but
Yeah.
still also know like, okay, I need to be disciplined. I need to get back to where my normal groove is. And honestly, that's why I like competition, because it focuses me on so many levels.
Got a purpose.
And then when I go out there and whatever the result is,
Mhm.
win or lose, I'm like the grind through it. There's the training, just the element of like setting all that up in the process. That's the fun part. And even though it kind of, you go through that suck, and then if you win and you have victorious matches, it's like, okay, that's the result of the effort that I put in, willing to embrace that suck.
Yeah.
And it makes it worth it.
What about like maybe one thing for me, you talked about the food integrating back into like eating food, essentially. What was one of the things maybe that was challenging for you to integrate back into normal life? You know, because you lived in this unique environment for like 35, 40 days where you were just like surviving. It's very basic in some ways. It's just like survival, get enough sustenance to keep you going.
Yeah.
Like getting back into normal life, like every day, getting back to work, whatever. Is there something that was extra challenging about that or even unique?
Yeah, it was for sure challenging. Just coming back and trying to find my groove and get into the routine, because going from Alaska and being in that environment, and which it's weird because you are in such a vast place, wilderness, that I mean, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. Trying to appreciate it in the moment was challenging for me because we were in the suck. And so I would try to be grateful each and every day. Not a very religious guy. Do have a faith. Do believe that I'm here for a purpose. Being out there, all I could do each day is just look up to the sky and be grateful for being there. Because I could have been one of the 4 that went home and never knew what this experience would be like. So I try to find gratefulness even in that environment, even though it was just in each and every day. So that got me through that. And then leaving that and then going back to modern life, it was a hard adjustment. And I've talked to other contestants, and they all agree that it was hard mentally to get back into a groove. And it took me a while, a couple months to get back. 2 things that helped me. One, getting back on the mat, right? No one gives a shit. No one cares if I did that. I think you knew. I had mentioned something to you about it.
Yeah, you mentioned to me that you're going.
I was vague about it because I couldn't talk a lot about the show. But I told you, hey, going away, I'm going to do this thing in Alaska. It's like a survival thing.
Yeah, I didn't really know. You're like, I'm going to go do this thing. I was
Right.
like, all right, we'll go
Because
do
what's
this.
cool is
we heard it. You said it a couple things, and I was like, all right, I'm not gonna ask questions because you probably can't answer a bunch of stuff. And
I wanted you guys to know, because it's like, all right, because I'm going to be gone for a while, and you're usually pretty good about, you know, reaching out to people that, you know, I haven't seen you in a while. Everything good? You know, you check in with us. So coming back, it was a tough time to transition back just to normal life and to just get in the right, like, I was like in a mental funk. So to get back in the mental state of having just like a good attitude, man, it was tough. So getting back on the mat, because that's where I feel like I feel grounded, and there's no bullshit there. So for me, that was helpful to get back on the mat. And it's like, realize like, man, okay, I'm out of shape. I'm like carrying a lot of weight because my weight went so far
Back
one
the
way, and
direction.
then I ballooned back up. I was
Sure.
like 160 something pounds.
So what happens is, like, when you go through, you probably incurred some metabolic damage. So what happens
Shit,
is your body is, when you're starving like that, your body then basically essentially your expenditure of calories, what's called your BMR, drops, because your body's like, okay, we need to like survive, so let's push down. So maybe let's say that when you went in there, your expenditure of calories is, I'm going to use a really round number, 1,000.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, then by the end of it, it might have been 700, because your body's like, hey, we need to reduce as much energy expenditure as possible because we're trying to conserve. But then when you go back to eating, now your calories stay down like that. So your expenditure, your BMR is actually lower. And then when you increase the food, now you've got a bigger surplus of calories. And this is why a lot of people, when they do these hard diets and they starve themselves and then they go back to eating just like normal, they end up gaining more weight because they had metabolic damage. And so, yeah, you definitely had some issues going on there. So yeah, your weight was going to yo-yo back the other direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And it affected me for, I would say, about a year. And it was hard to process because I wasn't used to that. I usually could get down to a weight class and, like felt like I had a good sense of control over it. So, the other thing that helped, aside from getting on the mat, is because that's such a huge part of our lives, right? I mean, it really is even though I'm semi-retired or pretty much retired now from being a blacksmith and shoeing horses, it actually was somewhat therapeutic getting back around them, because that's what I did for 15 years.
Kind of brings you back to your old state,
to the norm, to what I'm used to.
Yeah.
And having an old customer call me and say, hey, I need you to come out here and take care of this horse, this and that. And I feel like I'll make a difference by helping this animal. And obviously the one specifically I'm thinking of is a horse that had foundered. And if anybody doesn't know what that means, it just means that it could be fatal to the equine athlete, where their coffin bone, their pedal bone will actually push through the bottom of their sole. And once that's exposed, it means that they are going to be put down. So knowing that I had an impact on this particular horse, and the woman that owns the horse, and she hired me and I'd been working on this horse prior to the show, and then come back to that and feel like I made a difference. I felt like, oh, that's a little progress. I feel like mentally it's benefiting me. So getting back to just like my normal routine, it took a while to do that. And honestly, I was kind of like searching other things that I could do, maybe choose a completely different career path. I was a mess, but getting back on the mat definitely grounded me. Getting back underneath horses helped me, and even not full time, but just a little bit, just enough to be like, oh yeah, this is you. This is what you are, and this is what you did, and this is what you do. And so, that really helped. And I wasn't the only one. I reached out to some of the other contestants, and for them, it was the same thing. It just took a while for them to get back into the groove of normal life.
Well, I think that, it's obviously you read about people, like I love reading about people's memoirs and their biographies and things like that. And when you read about people that go through these incredibly challenging, prolonged experiences where they're removed from their normal, like, setting, this can be obviously military people. This can also be people that are going excursions and people that go on these like, you can read about adventurers and like people that would travel for back in the 1500s and stuff. When they come back, it's like there's this weird process of reintegrating. Like reading about I think it was the Celts. It may have not been, but there was like an old, like a tribe that when their warriors would come back, the women would bare their breasts for them and have their children with them, and they'd be like, come back to us. Yeah. Because you could be like, remember why you fought. Yes. Remember why you went through this whole thing. Come back to us, please. And so coming back to those things that you normally did, the horseshoeing, the rolling, all these things that are the normal makeup that have nothing to do with this external thing. It's interesting that you kind of like use those things to come back to, like I said, to ground yourself back to reality and come back to the the normal person that you are, right?
Absolutely. I mean, because also being a dad, one of the things I struggled with was the guilt of leaving my daughter.
That's
right?
hard,
and,
man.
and as a dad, I'm sure you understand that,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So that definitely messed with me, and I tried not to let it crowd too much room in my mind, but at the same time, it was a constant, and so I
Sure.
had to really think about, because I missed her birthday out there, and while I was out there, and the day of her birthday, I just remember thinking like, okay, is this really worth it?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm missing a birthday. And, for a child at that age, is it detrimental to them? Is she going to suffer from abandonment issues? All these things are
Yeah.
it's the devil in my ear. And I had to realize that being I feel like a strong mental, having a strong mindset, that I could overcome that and not let that defeat me. And I had to reassure her to let her know that that's why this is why I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And she understands. And now it's, I think that
And she'll look back on it and
yeah.
it'll be like, that's pretty cool.
And now because she was watched the show and she thinks it's hilarious.
Yeah.
She thinks certain parts are really great. And so some of which
Probably
are
your
somewhat embarrassing.
butt was on there.
I literally show my ass, right?
It's
on
good.
worldwide television, but
He's got lots of men that send him messages every day. Those
That's
are
right.
funny.
oh
You
man,
knew that
you
was
don't
gonna
want to see
happen.
my inbox,
Oh,
man. It's
bro.
wild. I mean, to
I love
me,
it.
it's entertaining, but at the same time, it's like, man, people are wild. People are crazy.
People are wild with the internet.
Yeah.
When they have when they can be anonymous and they can just like say whatever they want to.
Yeah,
It's
anonymous
weird.
shit posters, man. It's so I stepped in a little bit to you all's world because you guys are out there in that space.
Well, you even had some of the women hitting on you too.
That's awesome.
Some Europeans, some French women.
Yeah.
I got a message today from a woman from Czech Republic,
Nice.
and I had to, it's
Yeah, I know.
What
bro.
did
I
it
get
say?
it's all entertainment for
Yeah.
me, but at the same time, I had to translate like what she was saying, and I thought it was actually another hater,
Sure,
because I get a
sure.
lot of haters,
Right,
right?
right,
And now it's just, to me, it's funny, it's hilarious, but she definitely wasn't a hater, but nonetheless, to me, it's like it's a whole nother world,
Yeah.
and luckily for me, I don't really like, I'll have some engagement back and
Sure.
forth, and because I like I said before, I'm kind of a shithead. I like to troll some of these people.
Sure.
Well, this is something that
And I have fun with it.
This is something that you did a long time ago. I mean, from the time I met you, I remember it was like we would do things to like just to see what kind of reaction we got out of people. I remember like remember we were in Chicago. I had a terrible British voice, and like I was talking to the person on the phone, like it's like about their Wi-Fi and asking them questions. And then I remember you would do things just like like funny trolling people. You'd have like some guy on the phone and like
it's all in good fun.
Yeah,
I like to heckle people.
Yeah.
And because it's entertaining, and it's no different than, at the end of the day, it's just like pranks, right?
Yeah.
And jokesters.
Well, that's the time period that we kind of, as we were growing older, like there was like the phone call pranks and stuff.
Oh, what's the show?
The
What's
Jerky Boys.
The Jerky Boys. That was it.
Yeah,
The Jerky Boys,
man.
remember?
I mean, I love that stuff. So for me personally, like, to me, that I could laugh all day. And the more upset someone gets about something that they take a little too serious, it's easy for me to poke the bear. So back to your question with Javier and Brian, that's all that is.
Okay.
Right. And I think in some cases it might be crossing the line, which is fine. There's some other underlying things, and you can kind of see through it. So there's a lot of gay stuff, right? Which to me, I find it hilarious to heckle him, because some people are homophobic. And if I find your weakness, right, well, I'm just going to poke it until you break, man. So
that's Big Brother right there.
Well,
dude.
because
brother.
like, for instance, if you and that goes back to an extension of who you are and who or what, the things that are inside of you. Because like, for instance, we at the gym, this is something, I mean, like, you make a gay joke or something, it's like, it's funny. Yeah. It's like whatever, nobody cares,
Nobody cares.
But if that person has an issue with it, if it bothers them, either maybe if they are gay and they don't want to open up about it, it rubs something, or if they're on the other end where they're just very homophobic, right, then it's like it triggers something. Like, whoa. We're just messing.
Yeah, you're gonna get a response.
Yeah.
And then to me that just exposes a weakness. And so it's like, oh, I got you, man. I got your number. So if you see that stuff, that's, there's some of that, and it's friendly. I have no animosity towards anybody, any of the contestants, but just there's some things that kind of unfolded, and some things I found out, and some things that's like, I'm going to run with this, man. And hopefully people are laughing, and some people might think it's in, you know, bad taste or maybe crossing the line, and that's okay. I don't care. Cause to me, I find it somewhat funny, and I try to draw the line somewhere, but at the same time, like I like to push the envelope a little bit. And that kind of goes back to still playing the villain, the protagonist villain, right? I mean, some people might portray me as the antagonist, which is fine, but I kind of like to be the anti-hero, and I'll just kind of play that out.
Justin. I love it. So how do you think life's changed for you? I mean, Chew may have asked a version of this question, but I want to know, like, what's different now? Like, how's life changed? Is there any way that you feel like that things have like been different?
A little bit. There's more opportunity for me, which I'm thankful for.
Yeah.
And you know, I feel like there's part of me that still kind of wants to be a little bit of a shithead, but I still need to be professional. There's some companies that I represent. There's some brands that have allowed me to be aligned with them.
That's awesome.
So those opportunities are great. And I want to run with it. And it's the companies that I'm aligning myself with, or vice versa. I feel like it's a good fit and a good relationship. Outside of that, not a whole lot has changed. I mean, I'm still me. I still want to go to the gym. I still want to be better on all levels. I still want to pursue the purpose and passion in my life, and you know, be stronger mentally, physically, you know, keep building wealth and other opportunities for other people, creating atmospheres and opportunities for other people to be a part of, such as the Costa Rica trips and stuff that, you know, that we do and that Chewy's been a part of with me, and now that you're going.
Yeah.
So, you know, life has, there's some doors that have opened, and then there's some other areas in my life that have closed, and I'm okay with that, because what I felt like certain things were important are not really that important, where I felt like maybe they were, and probably for the wrong reasons. So for me, I'm just trying to focus on certain things in my life that I feel like are important, and that I gain fulfillment, and where I can make a difference. And, you know, maybe some other opportunities might open up for other shows or other opportunities to capitalize on, maybe in that TV space. And I don't really care to become like a celebrity, but what's interesting is that there are people that are recognizing me now. So I'm back to the capability of being, you know, just, I'm a little bit more alert. Not that I'm paranoid, but for instance, I had someone, and I had mentioned it earlier, this past weekend, look at me, and I could see the recognition.
Look.
Yeah, he's giving me the look, and he's recognizing me, not as in a recognition of, I know you from somewhere. He's recognizing me from the show, and he walks up to me, and I had seen this guy, and it's at my daughter's gymnastics class, right? And he brings his phone up to me, and he shows a picture of me from the show. He's like, "Is this you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, friend or foe?" He's like, "Oh, friend, man. Well, I got to talking with this guy, right?" And he just looks like some guy that I probably used to snowboard with, right? It's just some dude tattooed up, kind of, you know, kind of a
shoulder length
interesting hair. Well, I mean, not shoulder length, but just like kind of like a bushy haircut. And maybe it was just his off day, but come to find out, the dude's a police officer, Louisville Metro, trains jiu-jitsu at a former gym I used to train at. Right. And man, we broke down for like 20 minutes while we were waiting on our kids to come out of gymnastics class. So, which to me, so life-changing, right? Meeting people. Otherwise, who knows if our paths would have crossed, other than maybe just say a brief conversation because our kids go to the same place. But the fact that he recognized me, and then I've had a couple other incidences where people have recognized me, and it's all been good. It's all been positive, because I don't think the haters online really have the balls to say what they say online in a confrontational way to me in person.
Of course not.
And I feel like even if they came at you for whatever reason they may hate you for, or you or myself, that it's really going to carry any weight. So if they did, and if it was that personal to them and they really wanted to like test, I tell them the address of Derby City, and we can come figure it out, you know? And I say that jokingly, but it's like, if it means that much to you and you really feel like a certain way towards me because of a damn TV show, then we could figure it out. But I don't think it'll ever come to that. And some people that reach out to me like, oh man, the fact that you do jujitsu, and I've had people inviting me to their gym out in California, across the world, in Australia, places that, if I ever happen to visit, then yeah, I'd be happy to, I mean, so life has changed a little bit, but for me, I kind of like just still being kind of somewhat of a recluse and not have to be too extroverted, but I still like to be friendly and talk to people and if people are fans, I feel like I need to kind of correspond with them in a way that is appropriate to the companies and who I am as a person and what I represent.
Yeah. So if people want to kind of get a hold of you or kind of see what you're up to and maybe learn about some of the people you're working with, like where can they find you? Probably on Instagram, and then like what are some of the companies and some of the people you're working with now?
Working with this jerky group?
Yeah. So absolutely. I brought this.
Is that one open?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why
we had a little bit of bourbon. And I'm getting a little hungry.
I brought it for you guys to
get it
to sample. So
tell us about it real quick while we're partaking.
Yeah. So this right here is called Jamie's Jerky. A good friend of mine named Sasa Watt out in
Hold it up there, Justin.
Colorado. This is certified organic. You can find this organic beef jerky that her and her father make. Right. It's all organic. It's called jamiesjerky.com. You can go to jamiesjerky.com and get some great beef jerky from a company that is kind of like a smaller company. They're growing rapidly. So shout out to Sasa Watt and Jamie's Jerky, her father.
It's good.
It's amazing. And it's pretty big in Colorado, and it's growing, and a lot of people are paying attention to jerky. I like beef jerky, especially when I do these survival shows. So a lot of times you can't pack a lot of food on you. If you do, it might be a granola bar. Best thing to take with you, beef jerky, because it'll give you just enough to sustain. And if I had to go on the show or any show again, I would cheat like a mofo and I would pack jerky all over my body, and I would not worry about anybody finding it, because I would put it in places you don't want to look. But this is definitely
awesome,
a godsend, and a shout out to her, because thank you, Sasa, for sending this to me, and I'm affiliated with this company here too.
Sweet.
So yeah, I mean, you can find me on Instagram. My profile is open. It's public. It's not private. jcourt003_. I'm on Facebook too. I have nothing to hide. I have an open account. I don't have a private account. A lot of people decided to go that route, but for me, it's just like, if you feel like you need to comment on one of my posts and talk shit, that's fine. If you want to send me some love, that's fine too. Another company that I represent is one of the products, and probably the most talked about on the show, at least for me, is the gear that I had, and it was the wool anorak. That's from a company called Lester River Bushcraft. They have an Instagram page. Their is on my profile.
What is an anorak?
Yeah, so it's basically just like a hoodie, and it is 100% wool. And the company is based out of Minnesota, and the owner is just a super cool guy. He also makes. He has another. He sent me this. I'll show this here if I can pull this up. This knife, which is my everyday carry. This little knife right here, and this thing here, I've put it through hell and back in the last 6 weeks since he sent it to me. And it has a nice, here, let me just take it off, and I wear it as kind of a necklace because it works for me.
You'll take your headphones off.
And yeah, I will here.
Oh, okay. Never mind. You didn't.
Oh, I still do. Hold on a second. But
Justin's caught up.
Yeah,
I mean, this
check
jerky,
that out.
it's good, dude.
So that's my EDC, my everyday carry. There's a lot of different knives that I like. That sucker's really sharp. And it's made by Winger Blades.
He's telling me, he's like, hey, please don't stab yourself, Chewy.
So Winger Blades makes that for Lester River Bushcraft. He sells those on his website, and I'm going to do a post about that. I've just been putting it for everything from cutting little envelopes open to cutting tarps and rope and anything that I need, even with my business.
What's the handle made out of?
That's a great question.
It's got like a nice little.
I know, but I don't know. I wish I knew the answer to that. But check it out on LesterRiverBushcraft.com, and he sells those. And there's another sheath that he sells with that for like your pocket. that you could put
I
inside your
shouldn't sheath
front
it. You
pocket.
need to sheath that yourself, bad boy.
Yeah, well,
Not doing
this Kydex thing, it actually has the imprint there.
It's pretty
which
cool.
Is
Yeah, it
nice.
slides
So,
right in.
but Lester River Bushcraft in the anorak, and I have one of the Burrell field jackets, and it's 100% wool. It's one of the most comfortable things I have, and that was part of the gear that I took with me out there in Alaska. And I told him, I messaged him, and I said, man, I put this thing through the test, and I put it through hell and back. And there's been other contestants on shows like Alone that have worn that same thing.
Sweet.
So I know that on the show, people were messaging me about that specifically. So shout out to Lester River Bushcraft and the products that he has. Aside from that, obviously, another company that I'm super 1,000% happy to be aligned with, and you can attest to this too, is Origin.
Heck yeah.
Out of Maine, and 100% USA made, and their gis, rash guards, their jeans, boots, which I don't have jeans or boots, but
their jeans are nice.
Yeah,
I've got a pair of jeans.
Do you? Yeah,
Okay.
that's the next thing I want to get. I have part of their hunting line. This guy right here.
Yeah, it's pretty new, isn't it?
Yeah, this is relatively new. Like
they launched it when they launched the beginnings of their hunting line when we were up there for camp.
Very cool.
I was hanging out with Pete and those guys, and they're going through the steps of it. So
at the immersion camp,
when we were at their immersion camp,
yeah,
like Pete was, I mean, he was like, he's got like hundreds of people there for this camp, and then he's like working with these guys in the back rooms, like, all right, man, let's get this thing going. We're getting ready to launch it, everything else. Yeah,
cool, dude.
Yeah, so I'm super stoked to be affiliated with Origin, and not only their jiu-jitsu gear, their gis, but the hunting line, because I'm an avid bow hunter. And this product here that I just showed is their new line, obviously, but that's wool, so it's pretty damn cool. And Jocko fuel as well, which is great. And aside from that, I'm an ambassador for a local company here in Louisville, a wellness company that is geared towards recovery, and it's called Wi-Fi Wellness, and they're right here in Louisville, Kentucky. So if you need,
where are they located at?
I can tell you real quick. I'll
Like
give them a shout out. So they're in Middletown.
Okay.
Middletown, and they have, let's see, so many different. I don't even know what you call it.
Like saunas. They got
all types of different modalities that you could utilize for recovery, or even if you're just wanting to go in, they have an esthetician there if you wanted to get facials. And I mean, that's a whole nother side of it that I'm learning about. But I went in there today earlier this morning, and sat in their oxygen, the hyperbaric chamber.
Nice.
And so they have the infrared sauna, they have cold plunge, they have float tanks, PEMF, so magnawave therapy. That's just a few. The list goes on. There's so many things there that they have, that they offer. And for me, it was the whole reason I started going there is because when I came off of the show, I was in a bad spot physically. So I went there to go get vitamin shots. I had NAD therapy, the IV. And so just to kind of help reset my system. And so it was just something I was like, yeah, this made sense. Sure. I'm going to go to a wellness clinic to kind of help me get back on board. And Wi-Fi Wellness, they are in Middletown. It's 106 North Watterson Trail right here in Louisville. And I can't thank them enough. They seen that I was coming in, and just the more I got to talking to them and being somewhat personable and asking them tons of questions, and then just talking about being in Alaska and my experience. Because when the girls were giving me shots, they're like, oh, what are you doing this? Well, I'm going to this competition and I'll be back. Or I'm going to Costa Rica. I want a vitamin B12 shot. And so just kind of having that relationship with them, they reached out to me. It's like, oh, we know that you do these cold plunges because your Alaska stint. Yep. Would you like to represent the company? So I'm proud to represent that company. Very too, cool. Because that's a gift that keeps on giving.
That's awesome. Justin, thanks, man. I think, Chew, you got anything?
No, that's it, man. Appreciate you being on.
Dude. Yeah, well, thank you guys. I appreciate you having me.
It's been a while. We're proud of you, man. You did a great job.
Yeah,
it was fun watching you. It was fun watching you do your thing and being a badass out there. It was very cool. It was very cool. Like I said, we were kind of talking early on. It was like, I think you're one of the people that really progressed that storyline, made that show exciting. And I think you heard that more than once. But I think it was fun. It was fun to watch you kind of, shake some things up, suffer a little bit, do some difficult things. But, it was cool.
Yeah, I just wanted to move the game along. And I feel like it was important to expedite that process.
It's all about ratings, baby, right? They want to see that.
Yeah,
they want that stuff.
Yeah, man. And any opportunity you get to show your ass, why not do it on worldwide television stage? So it was fun, and thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, man.
All right, guys. So thank you for joining the podcast, and go back to the other view.
This one?
Yeah. If you guys are watching the video, I wish my arms looked like this all the time. Wouldn't that be great? Just beautiful. Like bang. Anyway.
Flexing.
But again, thank you guys so much for joining the podcast. So again, if you guys haven't watched the show, I encourage you to go watch it. It's fun. And again, you'll know some of what happens, but there's so much that goes on during the show. And me and my wife, we got sucked into it. I remember there was a weekend we just watched the whole darn thing over a weekend because we got into it. And right about the middle of the season and the episodes, it starts becoming a nail biter. And so I was like, all right, we just got to finish this thing up. But it's a cool show. And again, if not that, I encourage you guys to seek out new skills, new things to challenge yourself with. I think it's a really good practice. And you think about and I'll go off on a quick tangent, we'll be done. The idea of like leisure and recreation. We think of sometimes as leisure as being lazy, not doing anything, but that's not when you actually look at the etymology of leisure, right? In the way that the Greeks would use the word leisure. It talks about like it doesn't mean being lazy, right? That's not what it means. Go look it up. And then also, if you think about recreate, you're creating something again. Like you're creating something. It's not just I'm going to go eat potato chips and play video games all the time. Not that there's anything wrong with that. If I'm going to go play video games, I play sometimes from time to time, just for like to dump out some stress or whatever. But like, go out and develop skills, do things that are challenging to you, do new things. It's so much fun. And in a lot of cases, you'll find, at least I have, and I think Justin has as well, that a lot of times you see these commonalities amongst all these things, right? So your jiu-jitsu, your snowboarding, your horse riding, your survival stuff. There's threads that run through all that stuff. So again, I encourage you guys, if nothing else, if you don't watch the show, or you should watch the show, but if you don't watch the show, go out and start developing a new skill, challenge yourself, whatever it was, something that you want to do that you find interesting, that you might want to do, maybe something that's been sitting on the plate or in the back of your mind for 20 years. And now you want to explore it, go do it. And again, big thanks to our sponsors, Charlotte's Web. You can check them out at charlottesweb.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu20. Again, if you're a avid CBD user, great, fantastic. If you've never used it before, I encourage you to try it. For me, at least when I first started using it, or before I started using it, I thought it was snake oil because it just sounded like some supplement that had too many benefits. And I don't know about that. Started using it. I liked it a lot. Use it as part of a nighttime sort of winding down routine. And so I like to share it with other people. So if you haven't tried it, go to their website at charlottesweb.com. They've got cool products like tinctures, gummies, all that stuff. They also have a really good balm that you can rub on. So if you want to treat some like sore areas after training, super useful. And again, the code for that is Jiu-Jitsu20 at checkout to save 20%. Also, if you want to get some new t-shirts for Jiu-Jitsu, gis, rash guards, shorts, anything gear or merchandise related, you can go to epicroll.com. Cool t-shirt designs, good quality stuff. It has my bearded approval, my hairy thumbs of approval, 2 hairy thumbs up. But you can go to their website at epicroll.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu for 15% off. And again, another website or another company that supports us that, again, I really like their products is Manscaped. And that was the company that was the most resistant to, because I didn't want to talk about trimming my balls up. My balls. It's just not something that's super exciting, trimming yourself up. But the products are really nice. Actually, I really like the products that they've sent us. I also like all the soaps and the balms that they've sent. Everything smells amazing. And it's become like my on date night, I wear their cologne, and
it smells good.
It's good stuff. So again, I have no problems with sharing it to people. And a lot of you that have bought their stuff before have sent me messages saying you really like it. So I'm happy to hear that. So again, if you are a man or you have a man in your life who needs to step up their grooming game or wants to step up their grooming game, check them out. Manscaped.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu20 for 20% off the order, and you get free shipping. And again, guys, if you want to support the podcast directly, you can do so by going to our Patreon, patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. It's a very inexpensive little membership that gives you access to an exclusive library of content, supports a podcast that you listen to hopefully every week. Check it out. And if you want to get my daily email, you can do so by going to my website at chewjitsu.net/join, JOIN. Upon joining, you'll get access to my daily email and all the stuff that includes. And I also send exclusive offers for any of my products, my camps, my gis, rash guards, whatever I've got going on. The email list is the people that get the first crack at it, and they get all the sort of the inside scoops on stuff. So check it out if that's something you're interested in. And again, guys, thank you so much for joining us this week, and we'll talk to you next time.